Hello and welcome to the EcoCast by Actual Tech Media. Today's topic, supporting and enabling modern applications. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got an exciting new topic lined up for you today. On this event, you'll hear from experts at Zerto, Sysdig, AirKit, Scale Computing, Lightbits, Pure Storage, Outsystems, and Gigamon. What an awesome lineup. If you want to learn about some of the most innovative, exciting solutions in the world of enterprise technology today, you're in the right place. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as your moderator. Before we get started, just a few things that you should know about the event. As always with the EcoCast, we have some awesome prizes. I'll be talking about those in just a moment. And of course, we also want this to be an educational event. We're all former IT professionals ourselves here at Actual Tech Media, and we want to help you to solve your technology challenges. We encourage you to use the questions box there in your audience console, and we'll be doing dedicated Q&A sessions with each of our expert presenters today. You can also socialize the event directly from your console. You don't have to leave and go over to your phone or over to the Twitter website. If you click on the Twitter icon on the bottom of your screen, the hashtag for today's event will be automatically appended. And then in the Handouts tab, you'll find some excellent resources hand-selected by each of today's expert presenters. I'm talking about special free trial links and other resources that you don't want to miss, so make sure that you check those out. On the event today, we'll be giving out 4 Amazon $500 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify. The winner will be announced live by me periodically throughout the event, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. All prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We'll reach out to you after the event. We also are running our Best Question prize for this EcoCast for not one $50 Amazon gift card, but one $50 Amazon gift card for each of the sessions on the event today. That's a lot of Amazon $50 gift cards. Now, to enter this drawing, you must ask a question. First off, that's the number one requirement. We will select the best question from there, from those that meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy. You can find that prize policy there in your audience console in the Handouts tab, so keep those questions coming. Now, thanks to generous attendees over the years, we have sent thousands of dollars to charities. If you win a prize and you'd like to donate it to charity, we would love to help you do that. We have donated to a number of these charities as well in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can download free educational IT books from gorilla.guide. Check that out there in your Handouts tab as well. The hashtag for today's event, which will be automatically appended if you tweet from the console, is ATM EcoCast. You can follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter and me as well, David M. Davis. Subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media channels over on YouTube, Facebook, and the 10 on Tech podcast over in the iTunes Store. And we post all of our latest and greatest content on LinkedIn, so make sure that you follow us there. Now, before I introduce you to today's first expert presenter, I want to chat briefly with you about some of the challenges that companies out there are facing around application and infrastructure modernization. When it comes to modernizing your applications, we're talking about the applications that run your business, the applications that are most critical to your company. These are the bread and butter of your organization, and it's really what we in IT are there for, to help run these applications and run them well. So the question on the landing page was, how prepared are you, your infrastructure, and your applications for the future of the business? That's what this event is all about. Now, I'm afraid for many of you out there, your legacy application and infrastructure that runs those applications might look a little bit like this if you tried to draw it on a flowchart. And for many of you, after you did that, you might be thinking just about how unreliable that infrastructure and those applications are, how overly complex it is, and simply how outdated it is. But not to fear, we've got some awesome solutions on the event today to help modernize your legacy application and infrastructure stack. But first, let's talk about some of the requirements here when it comes to application infrastructure modernization. There's no single solution you put in and like boom, your applications are modernized, your infrastructure is modernized. There's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. It doesn't have to be overly complex if you choose the right solutions. But you still have to ensure that your applications and infrastructure are always highly available and resilient should you have a failure. In the age of ransomware and malicious attacks happening every day, you must have super strong security. You have to always ensure that your data is protected and you'll be covered if there is a disaster. And honestly, you're going to have some awesome storage performance and capacity to back up these applications. These applications are hungry for data. We know our data is constantly growing, and the company always expects to have immediate access to that data. At the same time, our applications and infrastructure have to be affordable for the company. They have to make sense. And unfortunately, it comes back to, for many of us, we have to be prepared to do more with less, as the saying always goes. So these solutions that we're talking about today, they need to enable us to do more with less. Fewer people, less time investment, and in many cases less money than we were spending before on comparable solutions. These applications need a modern architecture and design, and you shouldn't have to have 100 programmers and spend years just to modernize your applications and redesign them for the future. Today we have low-code solutions that can rapidly help us to modernize our applications, and you'll learn about those on the event today. And then finally, we need telemetry, we need monitoring, we need analytics, we need logging. We need to know exactly what's going on with the applications and the infrastructure at all times. We need to be able to prevent problems before they happen and rapidly remediate them if they do. Like I said, you'll be learning about solutions across all of these different areas on the EcoCast today. But first, I want to hear about your application modernization challenges. Let's do a few poll questions. All right, I've just brought up our first poll question of the event today. This is the first of 3 questions I've got for you before I introduce you to our first expert presenter. The question on the screen is, I'm curious, what percentage of your applications do you feel are modern, and would you consider them to be well architected? And I will share the results of this poll with you, and you can see how you stack up with your peers on today's EcoCast. If you haven't answered one of these polls before, you just do it right there in the slides window. Select the option that corresponds to you and your company. All right, thank you, everyone. Let me share the results on this poll. And as you can see, it's really kind of spread across 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and 60 to 80 right there in the middle, almost tied, 30% on around each one. Only 3%, according to my statistics here, say they have 80 to 100% of their applications being modern and well architected. And on the other hand, another 3% roughly say they have none of their applications are modern or well architected. So interesting statistics. Thank you for sharing that with us. And this is kind of a follow-up question here, a related question. And that is, when it comes to modernizing applications, which of these areas do you find to be most challenging? Is it around availability and resiliency, just ensuring that these applications are always up and running? That's kind of become the expectation with, web-facing applications, thanks to, everyone consuming, the Facebooks and the Googles of the world. We expect our enterprise IT applications to always be up and running. Security, always a big concern these days. Data protection and data disaster recovery. If something does happen to the data center, we saw a tier 3 data center in Europe about a month ago that pretty much burned to the ground. Pretty horrifying to see the pictures and video of that. So you got to always think about data protection and disaster recovery, storage performance and capacity. These applications, like I said, they're hungry for capacity. They're hungry for performance of the storage, and they're always growing. So that's important. Affordability, we always have to keep that in mind in IT. We don't have, unfortunately, an unlimited budget or unlimited checkbook. And then just re-architecting the applications. I know for many folks out there, it's simply a daunting task, and you don't want to lift and shift things to a more modern infrastructure without also trying to re-architect the applications at the same time. But re-architecting applications is really challenging. And then finally, monitoring and analytics and logging, telemetry, just knowing what's going on with these applications. That's always a problem. Troubleshooting, preventing problems before they happen. So thank you for all the responses. If there's something on there that I missed, drop it in the chat box there, or the questions panel, I should say, and I will share it with the audience, and I appreciate your feedback. So let me share the results of this poll with you now. And according to my statistics, 54% said security. That was the number one greatest challenge that companies are facing around modernization of applications and underlying infrastructure is security. Really tied were affordability and just re-architecting the applications themselves. And then following not too far below that, data protection, disaster recovery, availability, and resiliency. So then followed by storage and modern analytics and logging. Lots of good feedback coming in. Thank you, everyone, for that. We do appreciate that. And then finally, last poll question before I introduce you to our first presenter. And that is, when it comes to modernizing your applications or your infrastructure, the question here really is, what's your time frame? Is this something you're looking to do, in the next 6 months, 6 to 12 months, 12 to 24 months, or maybe you're just not quite sure at this point? Thank you, everyone who responded to the poll questions. It's now time to kick it off with our first presenter. I'm excited now to introduce Anna Simonenko, Senior Solutions Architect at Outsystems. Anna, it's great to have you. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. I would like to welcome you to this virtual summit session and start by thanking Actual Tech Media for inviting Outsystems to be part of this event. My name is Anna Simonenko. I'm a solutions architect with Outsystems. And today we will cover what is low code and what is modern application platform, what is Outsystems, and how it enables and supports you in your journey of developing modern applications. I will show you a sample mobile application that was built using Outsystems. We will take a look at the Outsystems IDE or visual development environment and perform few changes to the code and see them reflected in our sample app. In essence, low code is a software development approach that enables the delivery of applications faster and with minimal hand coding. Low-code platforms are a collection of tools that enable the visual development of applications through modeling and graphical interface. Low-code is growing rapidly, and it's estimated by Gartner that 65% of all software development will include low-code by 2024. And it's already accepted by a large portion of Fortune 500 companies. However, just low-code approach is not enough for applications to perform and scale under high-pressure conditions. To solve complex software challenges, not only applications need to be built fast, but they also need to address deployment automation, dependency impact analysis, sophisticated debugging capabilities, as well as provide automated adjustment to allow for new technology updates, and enable automated governance of large application portfolios. And this is where modern application platform like Outsystems comes in to help organizations solve those most complex software challenges, to build applications fast, to build them right, and to build them for the future. Over the past few years, Outsystems has grown into the leader among low-code platforms and multi-experience digital platforms. And Gartner confirms that. We have now more than 1,500 customers globally, representing 70 plus countries and many industries, including banking, manufacturing, healthcare, insurance, government, and many more. And here, some of our most recognizable customers. Now, let's take a closer look at the Outsystems platform. Outsystems represents complete digital transformation environment that enables you to create modern mobile and web applications, deploy, manage your infrastructure, analyze performance, and so much more. We're a full stack development solution, which means that using our platform, you can build your applications from ground up, and we cover front end to the back end and all the code in between, including UI, business logic, business process modeling, and data. The development is easily done using Outsystems low code in our singular visual environment by dragging and dropping of many pre-built widgets and components. Along the way, the development is assisted by our AI and machine learning capabilities. Our architecture is based on the industry best practices and standards. It's modular by default and promotes decoupling and reusability of its components. And such approach enables drastically to accelerate the development process and therefore crucial for speed to market value for the business. We provide capabilities to very easily integrate with any external system. Outsystems Platform comes with pre-built connectors to any web service API or cloud service or database. You can easily integrate with your existing legacy systems as well as enterprise systems like SAP, Salesforce, and many others. You will be able to extend Outsystems functionality with your own code if you wish to do so. As a developer, you're always in control of what you create. There is a public repository of open source extensions and modules called Forge, and these modules are provided by Outsystems professional team, as well as contribution from our vast development community. Currently, there are over 3,500 Forge components that are available for download, and this number changes very quickly every day. Lifecycle management and Devops capabilities are a major factor in Outsystems customer success. Outsystems support entire application lifecycle, which includes deployment, operation, analytics, and management. We provide the tools to publish and deploy apps with just one click, monitor the performance of the apps, provide real-time analytics and user feedback. Configuration management and identity management are also all handled for you by Outsystems. And finally, our platform provides the entirety of the experiences that the users of the modern applications can expect. It includes mobile, web services, microservices, chat, voice, SMS, email, and so on. And we enable the developers of any programming level to be able to contribute in the creation of these digital experiences. Whether you're a professional developer or citizen developer with no programming training, or you understand basic programming concepts, you will be able to learn to use the platform tools to create those beautiful UI and workflows, as we provide actually a variety of tools for you to do so, ranging from professional IDE or development environment to our software as a service offerings, web interfaces or builders where you can construct workflow, define integration, or even create machine learning model. As part of Outsystems platform, applications are architected for scaling, performance, and security. There are more than 240 security checks automatically applied across the full stack of the apps that you build, protecting you from a variety of vulnerabilities. We also offer deployment flexibility. Customers can choose between Outsystems Cloud, public or private cloud provider of their choice, or to host on premises in their own data centers. Now, let's talk about what Outsystems tools and components are provided as part of Outsystems platform. Platform server. This is the set of servers that compile, deploy, manage, run, and monitor your applications inside your infrastructure. You can connect to the platform server from Service Studio, and that is visual design and development environment to build web and mobile apps. And once it's connected, developers can create and publish the apps to the platform server, and the platform server then can compile optimized code, deploy those applications to the application server. Each version of the app will be stored in the platform data database, and we will see how it works shortly during our demo. Integration Studio. This is the development environment where you can create extensions of the platform. This is where you could write your own custom code and integrate with any external database or other external resources. These extensions can be published and integrated within Outsystems Studio. Service Center. This is a web application, and once it's connected to the platform server, this is where you can do configuration and management of the applications. It gives you visibility into all the deployed applications and their dependencies, extensive logs, and runtime information about business process instances. Finally, Lifetime Console. This tool allows you to manage full lifecycle across different environments within your infrastructure. Using this tool, we can track application deployments, versions, and user access control on any of the environments. We allow you to define discrete DevOps users, groups, and roles so that you have freedom to develop the governance that makes sense for your organization. We can also gather performance metrics and analytics about our apps using Lifetime Component. With the help of the Lifetime Console, we can see that not only the development time is accelerated significantly, but the deployment and DevOps processes as well. And this slide summarizes all of the Outsystems major capabilities from the perspective of a developer, QA, DevOps, or the end user. So no matter where you are in a software development lifecycle, whether you want to design, develop, test, deploy, analyze, or manage, Outsystems provides you a complete support. Now that you had an overview of the platform, let me show you one of the mobile applications that was built using Outsystems. Field Services is a mobile application, and it's used by field services technicians who work for telecommunication companies, for example, on site. The app enables technicians to keep track of their orders, get tasks for the day, identify, pick up certain inventory for the tracks, travel to customer site, install some hardware, do quality checks, get customer signature on completion, and also gather customer feedback. So this application was developed by our professional services team. And to put it in a context, it took one developer 5 weeks to build everything you're about to see. So let's say I'm a field technician and I'm going to log in, and this is my homepage, and I see some beautiful UI with various charts and dashboards. I can see where my work orders are located, where my customers are, where I need to travel. I can click on the nearest warehouse and see which items I can pick up and load on my track by using this drag and drop capability. There's some customer satisfaction dashboards, work orders for the day. I can see the total travel distance I need to accomplish today. So let's click on the work orders that I need to finish today. And you can see that if I click on a particular work order, I either can start navigation to site, and it's integrated with Google Maps component and actually will show me how much time, if there's any traffic along the way. But I also can start my work order and just go ahead and start executing tasks on my checklist. So in order for me to register equipment that needs to be installed, it's asking me to use the barcode scanner. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. So one more time, I'm going to check the installation equipment right here, perform some tests, click next. And now this mobile app gives me opportunity to interact with the camera. This is where I can take a picture of the customer and I can send this information to our Azure Cognitive AI services, and it will analyze the customer age and mood. So let's try that. So let's assume my customer is George Clooney. I'll take a picture of him. I will use this photo and send it to Azure Cognitive Services to analyze. And it comes back as the age, sort of correct age, maybe estimate, and the mood that George Clooney allegedly has. So next, there's a voice recognition component, kind of where I can enter my comments and by saying something. Let's try. Hello, this is a test. Okay, after that, customer can go ahead and use the signature pad to input the signature, and we provide capabilities to actually integrate easily with DocuSign or Adobe signature verification services. So now let's say, for example, that as a field technician, my hands are busy. So I trained my Alexa with the skill to interact with field services app. And actually it's looked pretty cool. So let me try it. Field services.
Welcome. How can I help?
How many orders do I have?
You currently have 2 orders on your list.
First order.
Customer, Brandy Gutman, to replace router and telephone at 40 Ocean View Avenue, Half Moon Bay, California 94019.
Is customer happy?
Last service provided was rated with 5 stars, so the customer Brandy Gutman is happy.
So this is a pretty cool way to be able to use the applications even when my hands are busy, so I can use my voice command. And this is an example of an application that has been developed with Outsystems, but it could also have been developed by a number of different technologies. But what makes Outsystems different is the way how we build the applications, how we enable you to change your applications, and what the platform has out of the box to enable you to do that. So for instance, let's imagine that this application right now is in a quality assurance environment where it's being tested by maybe some QA people, or maybe a group of business users are testing applications in your UAT environment. And imagine they found a bug or something that would like to see implemented, maybe a new feature, and they want to provide real-time feedback. So in Outsystems, you actually have an embedded mechanism of feedback that's you can easily implement by tapping anywhere on the screen. You can circle the area that you want to highlight, where you want to provide feedback about. And for example, you can also give some kind of write a feedback. So for example, I'm going to write that I want to change colors for this widget. Once I press send button, this message is sent directly to the IT team. And now if I log in as a developer in our feedback back office, this is where I'll see my messages to be sent. And this is where I will see the message, and all applications within my environment that have that feature enabled. And here is my feedback back office, and we can see this is all the applications to the left that have that feature enabled. And for particular, this application field services model, this is actually the text message that I just sent to the IT where it says I want to change colors for this widget. And if I open this, it's going to bring me to exact location on the screen that I wanted to report, where I wanted to have that feature implemented. And if, for example, I use some specific ticketed system as Jira or Zendesk or any others, you can actually integrate this feature and receive the feedback in the systems you use internally. And if I am a developer and I receive this request, the only thing I need to do is actually to click this button, and then I will be immediately redirected to the development environment. And this is where my application will be opened automatically and with exact screen where I need to perform the change within my service studio. So now that let's go and look at our service studio or our IDE development environment and see how field services application field, and maybe try to implement that simple change that our business user is requesting. So now you see this is my development environment, my IDE Service Studio. And this is where in Visual Way, I can design web applications or mobile applications. In the middle, this is a sort of like a designer canvas. This is where you can drag and drop different widgets and components. To the left, you see a panel that represents different controls and widgets and any kind of HTML elements, anything that you expect to see on a web page or mobile page. To the right, you see 4 tabs that correspond to our 4 different layers of our full stack concept. So processes, that's where you will develop your business process models. Interface layer, this is where you will define your screens. And also this is where you will define your CSS and styling. Logic tab, and this is where you will define your actions, your business logic. Actions correspond to something like function or method in traditional programming. This is also where you will configure your integration with either REST or SOAP and any other protocol. Data tab, this is where you can find different database entities and their properties. In case of a mobile application, you will also be able to define local storage entities. And there is very nice embedded database client entity relationship diagram viewer, where you can take a look at all of the different entities, database and local storage entities, and see the relationship between them. So let's now go to our dashboard screen within the user interface. And we remember that business, during our previous demo, business wanted to maybe change some colors on the screen. And that scenario is very common, right? Where the business has an idea of maybe like change some logos or change some corporate color scheme or theme or background. So in this case, we're going to attempt to do that. And what we have out of the box is this theme editor. And using this theme editor, you can customize your color scheme, your backgrounds, your fonts very easily with the click of a button. So for example, let's say I want to change some background colors, right? I have an option to choose out of 18 available color palettes. So let's say I'm going to choose something blue. And I want to change my background to light blue. So right away, when I did that, all my screens were automatically updated. And that also included all the common screens that I inherited in my applications, including the login screen. Now, if I want to see this change reflected right away on my mobile device, I can do it with less than a minute. All I have to do is just click my one-click publish button and see until my component is published. Also, you can see at the bottom what the processes are going on in the background once publishing is happening, right? So we can see that new version of my app has been created, database scripts are being executed, code is being compiled, application is deployed to IIS application server, and finally, this deployment has been complete. One more important thing I want to show, or when we talk about Service Studio is important, is that Outsystems provides very, very powerful debugging feature, right? Not only you can debug your application within the browser or using Chrome simulator, but you can actually directly debug your mobile applications on a device itself, either Android device or iOS device. So this is a very powerful feature that enables you to deploy and see the results of your changes very fast. Now, if I go back to my iPad and click on Field Services app, you can see that the recent color change is reflected right away on my tablet. And this is how powerful the Outsystems platform is. No matter if you develop new application or making changes to existing application, you see the results very fast, and it makes the whole team that much more functional and productive, and your development experience very satisfying. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments, and feel free also to send me an email at anna.simonenko@outsystems.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
All right, excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Anna. We got a ton of questions coming in on this. Anna and the experts here at Outsystems will be responding to those as quickly as they can. But in the meantime, I brought up this poll question for everyone out there in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about the Outsystems solution? And obviously, there's a ton of interest from all these questions that have come in. So we appreciate your response here on the poll. And I will leave that up for a moment and let everyone respond to that. If you'd like additional details around technical, customer case study, specific pricing information, I saw a question about that. Get a personal demo. It was really cool to see the product in action today, but maybe you'd like a personal demo so you can ask all the questions that you would like, or maybe you just like to try it out for yourself. So again, I'll leave that up for a moment, and then we'll move on to our next presentation from Pure Storage. All right, thank you everyone for the great feedback as well in the chat there. Varun, Todd, James, I see lots of thank yous and excellent presentation. Nathan said loves the business logic, very robust. I agree. David, Michael, excellent feedback. Thank you everyone for the great comments. We do appreciate that. I'm sharing those, of course, with the Outsystems team as well. And Anna will be getting back to these questions as quickly as she can. Thank you, of course, for all the entries as well into the best question prize. So keep that in mind. All right, thanks for the responses to the poll. We do appreciate those. It's now time to move on. We want to keep this EcoCast moving, fast-paced. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you now to our next presenter. Welcome, Mr. Brian Carpenter, Senior Director for Unstructured Technology Strategy at Pure Storage. Brian, it's great to have you on the event. Take it away.
Hello, and welcome to Pure Flashblade, the UFFO platform for powering your modern applications. My name is Brian Carpenter. I'm Senior Director, Unstructured Technology Strategy for Pure Storage. Today, we'd like to talk about the evolving data landscape. That data landscape is really evolving as a result of the world changing. And that world changing is driving organizations to have to do things differently. As a result, well over 98% of organizations have a digital transformation strategy. And that digital transformation strategy is driving change in the way data is managed, consumed, delivered, etc. And that data, the growth of that data is being compounded by this adoption at roughly a 40% year over year CAGR. And typically, legacy infrastructure approached each use case as its own dedicated silo with as point solutions, and those point solutions had specific performance characteristics in mind, or were optimized again for those use cases, and as a result, they were either mildly inflexible all the way to completely rigid, depending on what they had to deliver to those applications. And so, whether it was a general NAS or was scale out DAS, and a backup appliance or an object store, they had to be built according to the outcomes that they were trying to deliver in those applications. But that approach really breaks as businesses look to data as a critical component of their organization. And that has created new business trends, and those trends are driving meaningful opportunity for change. And so, if we look at those trends, we're looking at things like technology, which needs to be built to meet modern application requirements. And it's the culture of the organization, and many cultures now want fewer, simpler, and easier to manage infrastructure as a result of the consolidation and the speed at which they need to move. And of course, the organizations themselves want to be future proof. They want to not only be able to consume for today's problems, but what's coming that they can't even predict necessarily. And so, as a result, you can see these two big trends, the business trends and the data trends themselves, are really driving how people want to consume technology. So, whether it's technical computing or fast object storage or protecting against ransomware attacks, customers are increasingly looking on how to manage modern infrastructure accordingly. And this legacy infrastructure does have some limitations that are important to overcome, whether it's the management pain or performance issues, you, uh, lowering the ability for the organization to share data as more people need access to it, and even inefficient use, such as stranding compute or storage in certain scenarios where silos are being formed. And so, as we look to solve the modern data challenge, Pure powers organizations at any stage of their digital transformation journey. Organizations need IT to be key to the competitive differentiation of the business or the mission, instead of being a business inhibitor or a blocker, as it's harder to adopt and harder to move while developers and business units are moving as quickly as possible. Many line of business executives identify IT as a business inhibitor versus a competitive differentiator, and roughly 43% identify data access as a key IT concern. And so, if we summarize that, it really is saying that organizations are saying they need unified fast file and object to be able to solve for those pain points. And so, let's look at what unified fast file and object does. Delivering on the requirements of these modern applications requires a few key characteristics of an effective storage solution for the digital transformation era. The first of those characteristics is multidimensional performance. That allows for high throughput and high performance, and even high concurrency for multiple simultaneous workloads. It's cloud ready, which is a cloud operating model giving agility, giving flexibility, giving the same tools on and off prem, as well as even the financial consumption model that matches in a multi cloud strategy for the organization. It's dynamic scalability, which allows you to reason about the scale and predict what you need, whether it's capacity, performance, additional metadata performance. As you grow those files from millions to billions, and whether it's file and object, you want that scalability. It's about an intelligent architecture that's built for Flash and is simple to manage, simple to upgrade, non-disruptive upgrades, and clearly you don't want to have to tune that for each workload that you deliver as you consolidate. You want it to be always available. You want that high availability, again, with those non-disruptive upgrades and with data protection and erasure coding and all the things that allow for enterprise availability. And you want multi-protocol support. So whether it's NFS or SMB or S3 or whatever may be coming in the future, you want great performance and them all to be treated as equal tools on the platform with all the same performance and cloud readiness and scalability across each of the protocols. And so what Flashblade delivers is unified fast file and object storage, which is it's UFFO is a new category of storage, and Flashblade is the leader of that category. It's engineered from the ground up for Flash to deliver the simplicity and multi-dimensional performance that enable consolidation of key unstructured data workloads. As we mentioned earlier, it's both fast file and fast object in a single platform, unified together. And Flashblade is tested and validated across a variety of use cases and applications. And these use cases are in almost every enterprise, every mission, every organization, however you think of yourself. And while they may require native fast file today, many are even transforming to native fast object in the future. A customer who may have started with rapid restore for their modern data protection on file 2 years ago is leveraging the exact same platform today with investment protection, doing native fast object on the exact same backup application that they were using before to do those restores and to meet those SLAs that their organization requires. And so, with Flashblade being the industry's leading unified fast file and object storage platform, it does address those demands of modern applications. It helps you consolidate workloads onto a single platform. So whether it's cloud native applications, and managing how you can associate data and even persistence with things like Kubernetes, whether it's analytics pipelines that include Elastic or Dremio or Spark or any of the other tools that people are building these app analytics platforms for. With AI, Flashblade has been powering AI architectures for years now, and we were the pioneer with AIRI of reference architectures for delivering AI at scale. And so you look at other things like healthcare, which leverages AI, it leverages fast file and object, and even technical computing and all the things, software development. There's so many things that aren't listed here. But again, Flashblade is tested and validated across numerous solutions and countless different applications that help power these use cases. Nowhere is it more evident how well Flashblade delivers for modern applications than in modern analytics pipelines. UFFO is the data storage for modern applications, and that data is what's powering these modern analytics pipelines. And so, as modern computing needs unified fast file and object, it delivers the simplicity that allows these pipelines to disaggregate where necessary. It delivers that performance that we talked about so that you can reason about the scale and in the delivery of these pipelines as a service, and then consolidating that data so that the pipelines can leverage multiple different streams or business units worth of data to get better insights. And so these applications are a little bit different in comparison with traditional applications, which were scaled up monoliths, and in many cases were built around DAS and the silos associated with keeping pools of data to deliver to a single application. Cloud native architectures want scaled out microservices and consolidated data so that you can leverage that analytics data without duplicating, without having to move, without having to manage all the different silos that each application might ask in a natural traditional environment. And data needs are evolving. These applications are multi-protocol. Many of them are born in object but ported backwards to traditional methods. But as the workloads become more high velocity and more multimodal, having object and file, whether it's SMB and especially NFS or even HTTP protocol, are very important for the data needs of these modern analytics pipelines and modern applications themselves. Modern applications and therefore modern analytics pipelines also need to be simplified as you get more and more tools and more data locations as a result of traditional design. Traditional design of analytics tools require DAS architectures where the compute and the storage grow together. And so as the environment scales, if you need more compute, you need to add both compute and storage. If you need more capacity for retention, you still have to add both compute and storage. And we see it countless times with customers. They want to be able to simplify, they want to be able to disaggregate. And it's really about which architecture can deliver on the promise of the agility they need while also giving them all the things that we talked about, such as performance and consolidation. And this is where Flashblade and UFFO come in. A pure consolidated architecture allows compute to grow independently of storage. So while you may be CPU bound in certain workloads, you can add that CPU, whether it's dynamically from your Kubernetes cluster or by ordering and adding more because you've simply maxed the resources of your environment. Or it's storage. Today, the retention requirements are a year, and tomorrow they're 7 years because of legal. And you want to be able to grow that storage without having to grow all the compute and the costs. You also want to be able to manage it. And you want every inch of data, whether it's the first most recent piece of data or that data that's a year old, to be linear in performance and predictable as far as scale and capacity and the types of queries you may have to do, whether it's a 30-day query or a 90-day query or an all-time query. Being able to deliver that data in a meaningful time frame, whether it's file or object, becomes very important to the performance of the application, to the results delivered to the business, and to managing this with simplicity so that you can disaggregate. Through the power of disaggregation, customers can begin to consolidate these analytics silos with multiple different Spark use cases and the DAS associated with those, whether it's an HDFS data lake and the MapReduce experience along with that, or Splunk with its traditional DAS approach. And even, if they want to have a Spark experiment they spin up, they want to eliminate those inefficiencies. They want to simplify, and they clearly need to consolidate file and object as they have different needs and different experiences, but they want to be shared across multiple different environments. And so a single interface with Flashblade allows you to have visibility into all the data and to be able to grow the file system independently of that compute. It also allows you to automate and scale, whether it's Kafka or Spark, independently for a batch job or a single large job, and then bring it back down to manageable levels during normal operations. And that disaggregation can be paid off by moving that data into Flashblade through file and object and unifying them into a single interface. And so in a traditional legacy analytics environment, somebody wants to spin up a new cluster, whether it might be Kafka or Presto or something to that effect. It then has yet another DAS approach. And you can see that sprawl, that management sprawl, that operational complexity, the cost of having to increase your storage to have yet another copy of that data. When you disaggregate and power it with UFFO and Flashblade, you could simply spin up another compute cluster, another thing to add to that pipeline, a net new pipeline as you deliver pipelines as a service, by simply creating a new compute layer, automating the workloads to that, and pointing to the similar data sources you were using the previous one to get you that single interface. And so, provisioning those new clusters on demand makes it ready in minutes, allows that scale to be simplified, and improves the experience between the business units and IT accordingly. And all the while, you want to deliver consistent performance and predictable performance. And so native file and object, as you can see here through the charts, are tuned for anything and relatively equal as a result of how Flashblade is architected. And that high throughput that we talked about is predictable and allows you to ingest more data. And so if you say we need to move from 15 gigabytes a second to 60 gigabytes a second of ingest as a result of scaling our IoT infrastructure from 1,000 devices to 5,000 devices, it's very easy to reason about how to deliver that throughput by scaling Flashblade linearly. And it may not require any other changes to your architecture other than the ingest of whether it's NFS or object in that unified experience. And the scale, There's so many stories that we have. We could speed up those historical searches, whether it's the first byte of data or the oldest byte of data, to be able to give a linear, consistent experience. We also can scale to extremely high rates that, can power any enterprise to look like a high performance computing environment, whether it's AI or technical computing, whether it's software development and scaling those build jobs, and anything in between. And you also want to be able to expand with cloud-like agility, and that means so many things. But at the end of the day, every customer really has a multi-cloud strategy, and certain workloads need to be in certain locations. Data gravity has clear impacts, and in reality, you want to not just have data in the right places, but as people move between clouds, you want a consistent experience. And so, with Flashblade in hybrid deployments, you get one technology stack with UFFO that allows you to disaggregate compute and go on to high performance object. And those same developers can then test or move to production in Amazon's S3 cloud. They get cloud compute that is disaggregated and leverage Amazon's S3 storage. And many people think of Amazon from a cost profile, but in reality, the size and scale of S3 on Amazon gives massive throughput and massive performance that many people don't pay attention to until the application is deployed. And as a result, if your users are developing in Amazon and they come back on-prem and they don't have fast object, they may get a bad throughput or performance experience as they rationalize in one direction. But likewise, you want to be able to use the same tools, get the same experience, and get predictable results in both locations. And that's what Flashblade and UFFO pays off. All of us at Pure Storage, thank you for joining us today. And as you saw from the analytics example, the same goes for many other use cases. We'd love to have you go to purestorage.com/Flashblade, jump in, take the test drive, and drive Flashblade today, and learn why Flashblade is UFFO.
All right, excellent presentation, Brian. Really appreciate that. I've just brought up the poll question for everyone out there in the audience. You should see that on your screen. Simply says, what additional information would you like about the Pure Storage solution? And obviously, there's a lot of interest in this solution. I can tell by the questions that have come in. There's too many questions here for me to count. So thank you, everyone, for the excellent questions. Brian, you ready for some Q&A?
Certainly. Thanks, David.
Absolutely. Let's see. I'll just start off with this one. They said that, you mentioned UFFO as a new category of storage. Would you say that any platform that supports file and object protocols is a UFFO platform, or how do you categorize those?
Yeah, not necessarily. So UFFO is really about addressing the needs of modern data and modern applications. And so, for example, the scale is necessary of supporting billions of small files and objects on a single platform. And obviously, it needs to be simple. I literally just got off of a customer call right before this great, cast, where they were talking about the simplicity necessary to drive these complex environments, and you have to be able to deliver that. And then, the other part of this is there are traditional tools that have added on these features. They started as one thing, and they sort of bolt on the rest. Building it from the ground up with that intent is what's necessary to be able to deliver to those modern applications, to give that multi-dimensional performance and candidly be UFFO.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Let's see. Here's another question. They ask, what are some of the key analytics applications that Flashblade typically supports?
Wow, that's a long list. It starts everywhere. So we see a ton of Spark. We clearly also see a couple of packaged applications like Vertica and Splunk. We see a good bit of Elastic, where Kafka is a daily conversation at this point, and then great object-based data warehousing tools like Dremio and Presto or Trino, and all of these different kind of tools. So it's really everything that you think of from like a sort of Apache, Hadoop, modern analytics ecosystem, as well as those AI tools like the TensorFlow and things like that, all fit in. And so, that's actually, there's actually a key answer here, which is part of what Flashblade offers is that kind of future proofing, where because it's open standards and open protocols, you might adopt a tool today, but that tool may change or not be working out for you 6 months from now. You don't want to have to migrate the data into a new DAS pool. You don't want to have to disrupt your pipeline. You simply want to add a new tool and then start analyzing that exact same data in place, which is what that UFFO and data hub story is all about.
Got it. Okay. Next question, file and object storage has been around for a long time, they say. So why should we be implementing UFFO right now?
Yeah, and it has. I mean, in many cases, object storage, or I'm sorry, especially file storage, right, like SMB and NFS, are older than a lot of the people that are having to still leverage them in their applications. And so you have to think about them different. You do have to refactor them. But you also want to be able to leverage object on these tools as platforms refactor. And so being able to support both NFS from a fast, unified experience and NFS and object allows you to be able to move data between those protocols as it makes sense, but also to, as you refactor, still leverage the same data platform, right? So data is different. It's growing exponentially. Most new growth is focused towards object, but you do want to still be able to support those other applications, which is where file is still king in a vast majority of enterprise data centers today.
Excellent. Let's see, I like this question from Luna, who asked, is UFFO only for certain applications, or could it work for in-house software as well?
Actually, I mean, I think that in-house software is probably better than most applications. While many applications will leverage either block or object, or they'll leverage block or file, in-house applications, are built by people who over time have had to do unique things. You may have a portion of your core competencies that are stored in a bunch of documents. You think about insurance companies as an example. But then net new, you might have customers submitting data through the website, and you want to store those in object because it makes sense. And so we see a ton of people who write custom applications. I was just talking to a customer again last night who had a custom in-house application, and they want to move it to our fast SMB because a portion of that is actually tied into a Windows ecosystem in their environment on top of the stuff they have in NFS and object. And so now they're using all three protocols for a custom application. So Luna, I would say it's not exclusive, but I think it actually tends to lend better to in-house software.
Interesting. Very cool. And then I'm not sure if you can share the answer to this one, but they're asking what kind of traction has Flashblade received in the market, and kind of who are the typical customers out there?
Yeah, I don't want to make a poor quote, but there's actually blog posts on purestorage.com that talk about the trajectory of Flashblade. But it's nearing $1 billion all time. And so, when you talk about the speed by which storage companies grow and the trajectory of which they grow, it is one of the fastest growing storage companies in the last 10 years. And it's really a product inside of an existing, already one of the fastest growing storage companies of all time, right? So it is being adopted across enterprises, across all sorts of verticals, across all sorts of public sector and federal use cases. It's really countless, the number of people who've adopted Flashblade.
Very cool. This question, they're asking about scalability of Flashblade. Can you kind of tell us, as you outgrow what you have right now, how does this solution scale up?
Yeah, it's a great question. Scalability, it is blades, right? It starts as small as 7 and grows to 150 in a single namespace. We obviously see people who will then adapt to multiple namespaces. And so that's the nice thing. It's predictable. Like we said, if you have 7 blades, you can reason about your performance and your capacity. If you know you're going to grow X over time, you don't have to buy it all up front. You can put it in. If you know you need a lot of performance, you can size for lower capacity but more performance. And then if something surprises you, you can resize non-disruptively into both high capacity and high performance. In a single namespace, it supports NFS, SMB, and S3 up to roughly 5 petabytes uncompressed. And with compression, we've seen customers get 8 and even 10 petabytes. Obviously, your mileage may vary based on the type of workloads. For example, if they're using a highly compressible Parquet format for an analytics pipeline, we wouldn't say you're going to get a ton of compression. But it's still, in many cases, they are getting a good bit of compression.
Nice. All right, so let's see. You answered David's question here. Does it support NFS? The answer was yes on that. Another question, they're asking if Pure has professional services for migration, from an existing storage array that's not Pure to a Pure solution, or would you recommend they work with a VAR to do that? How do you?
Pure. Yeah, David, Pure is partner led. And so we love our partners. We love our, our ecosystem is fantastic. We would always ask that you call them for your migration. That being said, there are times where we have to help out as well. We do have an entire professional services division. We obviously do specialize in migrations because the best way to get value out of a platform is to help you move that data there. So we can help you, whether it's Flashblade or FlashArray files or even FlashArray on block. We do obviously do migrations and can help out there. And whether it's object or NFS or S3, we can help any of those.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. Brian, really excellent presentation. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
And Brian, there's 25 other questions there still in the queue for you, so perhaps you can help those folks out as well. Again, thank you so much to the audience for all the excellent questions. We do appreciate those. I'll leave the poll question up there for a moment longer while I announce our first Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Susan Wright from Virginia. Congratulations, Susan Wright from Virginia. I will reach out to you to deliver that prize. All right, and with that, it's now time to introduce our next presenters on today's EcoCast. Welcome, Mr. Jeff Chen, Solutions Architect at AirKit, and Mr. John Koo, Senior Marketing or Chief Marketing Officer, also at AirKit. Jeff and John, it's great to have you on.
Hey, David.
Great. Yeah, David, thanks for having us today, and thanks everyone for attending. It's great to be here. My name's John Koo. This is John talking. Our format for today is Jeff and I are going to have a little bit of a interactive discussion, and we're going to talk about how any company can identify the business issues around customer experience and how they can go about finding a customer experience solution that suits their business. So just for today's agenda, we're going to go through a few different topics. I'm going to give a little bit of background about our company, AirKit, and then we're going to talk about Jeff. Jeff's going to tell us a little about his experience. Jeff is actually an AirKit customer who just recently joined us, but he went through the whole process of thinking about how he could solve customer-facing problems at his previous company, and then searching for a solution, and then actually seeing some of the results that can happen when you roll out a modern digital customer experience solution. So let's jump into it. So a little bit about us, AirKit. We started the company in 2018, and we spent the first couple of years really working on and developing our technology. And we'll talk a little bit about our founders actually previously started a company called RelateIQ, which is the first relational intelligence company. And it was acquired by Salesforce in 2014. And the company went on to stay at Salesforce and work on a variety of projects, which eventually became what's known as Salesforce Einstein. And over that time that they were at Salesforce, they worked with thousands, if not tens of thousands of companies in terms of, using Salesforce and all the technologies of that platform and helping customers invest over the last decade in building that platform of record for customer data. And that's what Salesforce does really well. The thing that they saw that wasn't happening is that all those investments in that platform of record for customer data wasn't helping their customers do any better in terms of engaging their customers, providing better service, or rolling out some of the new digital experiences that consumers are really demanding. And so they thought about that problem, and they called it the last mile. And they went and talked to some folks at Salesforce and said, hey, we want to leave and start this company. And Mark Benioff believed in the idea and wrote them a check. And they also raised money from Excel and Emergence. So that's how we got started. Now, why does this last mile problem matter? And what does it really mean? Well, as I mentioned before, your customers or consumers are really demanding a whole bunch of new channels of interaction. They want to be able to have service or to engage with you via web and phone, which is traditionally what they've done. But they also want to have things like text, chat, interactive voice, sometimes even over channels like WhatsApp or Facebook or Apple Talk. Now, on top of that, consumers also want self-service. The best companies, the companies that provide the best services these days are really about providing better self-service rather than necessarily having someone on the end of a phone taking care of your call. And you think about that when we think about companies like Amazon or Uber or Instacart. These are all digital self-service companies. And what that translates into for many of the companies that we speak to is that they have a mountain of projects, whether it's in sales, service, or support, where the line of business is asking them to go digital and to build these modern experiences across these different conversational channels. And that's led to a huge backlog of these types of digital customer experience projects. Now, enter AirKit. So what we see that problem as we talk to customers every day. And what our platform actually does to solve that problem is we've built a digital customer experience platform that is also based on low code. And what that means is that we've done a lot of the hard work in terms of front-end development or even building APIs on the back end to your customer data platforms, such that you can now create these digital customer experiences using pre-built building blocks. And what we find when you do this is that our customers are able to build these digital customer experiences up to 40 times faster than they would have previously. So we're talking about customer experience apps that might have taken a year or so, in some cases multiple years to develop, happening in weeks. And so this is a huge value add to our customers. But in addition, we've taken a lot of that, not only the development work that we've accelerated, but we've also done things like compliance, security, scalability, UAT testing, and we've automated a lot of that and made it a lot easier. So this is essentially not only speeding up the front end development, but lowering the technical debt you see on the backside of this. And so what does this all look like? The user experience, like I said, is all about using pre-built components and customizing them to what you want them to do. And it's also about taking components and being able to assemble them into like Legos into a customer journey. And so this is how what used to take years or so many months happens in days, if not weeks. And we can go into this a little bit later, and happy to give anyone a demo that wants to after this session's over. But I'm going to jump into conversation with Jeff. So I introduced myself. I'm a marketing guy at AirKit, and as I mentioned, Jeff, who was previously a customer at a company called Reusability, also recently joined us. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, John. Hey, everyone. I just wanted to give a quick bio of myself. I have an interesting background. I actually started out in the Bay Area at Sun Microsystems, and then after the dot-com bubble, I actually transitioned from high-tech to low-tech, where I was running day-to-day operations at recycling facilities across Southern California. I did still implement technologies while I was at the recycling company, and really to optimize a really paper-driven business. But then most recently, I was a senior technology manager at Reusability, managing our software development and our IT department. And it was a great opportunity for me at this last role prior to AirKit to really take my operational business and technology background and apply it to Reusability's reusable packaging industry.
So Jeff, you were recently at Reusability, as you mentioned. And can you tell us a little bit more about that reusability business? Like, what was that all about? Like, why was there a customer experience element to your business?
Sure. So Reusability, a little bit about them. So they were a privately held company which engaged in the management of what we called reusable packaging assets, specifically for the nursery business, so plants, trees, and whatnot, where they would track racks, and also for manufacturing companies where we would track shipping containers for them, or shipping boxes for them. So in managing these reusable packaging programs, Reusability had to do the following tasks, which are pretty repetitive, which would be tracking, picking up, and reconditioning reusable assets across the nation. And like a lot of companies, in order to track this, they're going out and making a lot of phone calls and sending emails to folks, following up and getting information from them. So that's just a little bit of the history about reusability.
Yeah, so most of this was happening through a call center or email?
Yeah, so most of our interactions with the customers would be considered the traditional or old school way of communications, which would be a lot of call center agents calling out, trying to get information from folks that we didn't have a one-to-one relationship with. A lot of cases, we'd be talking to retailers.
Oh, interesting. So people in the retail stores.
Correct.
Well, that sounds like a huge challenge. So what did your technology stack look like, and what were some of the pain points you had?
Sure. So at Reusability, when I joined, I actually had a really good opportunity. When I came in, we actually had initiatives to implement cloud-based technologies. So Reusability's environment was your typical small to medium-sized business, which had a on-premise phone system, and we actually had ShoreTel, and we were using Zendesk in order to track our calls, but these systems were not integrated with one another, and it caused some issues because our call center agents were spending a lot of time making calls and then entering data into Zendesk. So with going to having the cloud initiative, we were able to make some new automations by bringing in Zendesk and TalkDesk with the integration. But with that, Reusability's business was really highly seasonal, specifically in the springtime, which is different than many other retailers. But during that time, our call center agents would spend anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes on an outbound call in order to acquire information from our retailers, and then also on the inbound side, it would take anywhere from 4 to 7 minutes with people on hold. By moving to the cloud or to SaaS solutions, we gained marginal efficiencies. With some what did we use? We had automated calling, and then just the integration of auto dialing. Once we came up to a contact, it would auto dial out. But it really didn't make that much of a difference. We still had these long wait times for our agents calling out, and then also the hold times. Moving to the cloud, last year was really helpful for going to the work from home situation, but it really did not make a huge difference. One of the things, as we were implementing our solution, the exec team came back to us and said, and specifically our CFO, he said, "Hey, great, we moved to the cloud, but how else can we lower our operational costs?" So this is reducing headcount, because we're going into COVID, we had no idea what our business was going to be like. So they wanted to cut some headcount and do the same with less people, and then also improve our accuracy of, each one of those calls for us, we're basically getting the number of racks at a retail location. So we wanted to improve our information, or get the accuracy of our information. And then we also wanted to make it easier for our retail partners to schedule pickups. All of this is like a huge, it's a tall order, right? Like it's a big ask. So, I went out looking for self-service options, looking at a gamut of solutions from voice AI, also looked at Twilio, Zendesk Chat, and then also developing a custom mobile app. But none of these were like that single solution. And then, I kept on going back and forth. I did talk to TalkDesk about this because they had heard, because I was trying to integrate voice AI, and then they referred me to AirKit as a possible solution. So I reached out to AirKit. When I saw the platform, I had that aha moment where I saw all the items for self-serve that we were looking for, all in one place. And subsequently, we went ahead and selected AirKit as a solution for us.
Thank you, Jeff, first of all. But so tell AirKit, the platform, it can do a lot of different things. Like tell us a little bit about that solution that you rolled out for AirKit then.
Sure. So since we chose AirKit, AirKit helped us basically build a self-service web and tech solution for our retail partners, so that instead of us calling out, they could check in or report the inventory numbers to us for the nursery racks at their locations, and also schedule those returns. So no longer did we have to have an agent make that call out to say, hey, how much do you have out there, and explain exactly what we were looking for. So they're able to have a digital solution where they actually had a picture of what our particular product was, because there are multiple racks behind the Home Depots and Lowe's. So they could see specifically what our product was that we needed to retrieve. So from a digital standpoint, it was very straightforward and less time on the phone for our agents. And we could reduce the number of calls that we made out from our call center. It was super popular with the large retailers, especially Home Depot and Lowe's, and for you in the Midwest, Menards in the upper portion of the Midwest, because it reduced the time for them either to call into us or for us to call them and bother their garden center team. And this is really a non-productive activity for them. The folks in those departments, the garden center specifically, are there to sell plants to customers, right? Not go into the back of the warehouse and find out, hey, reusability is calling about these racks. So one of the main takeaways from our experience with going with AirKit and developing this solution is that we could do a whole lot with AirKit. Like, this was just one use case where we were able to find a solution and reduce costs. And every IT person or every IT department wants to earn a seat at the table. We, in a lot of cases, build these customer-facing apps. So it's easy for us to build these customer-facing apps, and then all of a sudden you have the ability to dramatically changes to a business line. So it's pretty cool from just going from a solution builder, so like we just build out solutions, to actually becoming a solution provider where we can actually provide solutions to the business.
Yeah, I love this story, Jeff. I guess for a lot of folks on the call, they're working in the technology team, making an impact and having that seat at the table is incredibly valuable. What did you guys measured the results that you got from this project? What did that look like?
Sure. So we had close to 100% self-service digital experience. I mentioned before that we did a increased the case count per agent by two times, a little bit, maybe by a little bit more. And we definitely did have that reduction in contact center headcount. As you can see, it's 60%. And then we did have an amazing ROI in the first 6 months of 140%. So we basically paid for AirKit and more by moving to a digital platform.
Awesome. Well, so Jeff, you've been through this now, and you got some results. Now, I'm sure our audience is kind of looking at this like, oh, this sounds great, but you know, I don't have a reverse logistics, retail fixture providing business. How do I figure out if there's an opportunity in my organization for this technology or this solution? Do you have any tips?
So, you know, one of the main things that, you know, every IT department looks for, right, in all the companies that I've worked for, is that silver bullet in order to solve everything and be the hero at the end of the day, right? And believe it or not, AirKit is pretty close to being that mythical bullet, right? So, one, you know, John talked about before. Long lead times in building applications. Well, AirKit's is a low-code platform where you can basically build out apps. Like, we built out our application in, I think, 2 weeks. And being the head of also managing the software development, if I had gone to my folks offshore, it would have taken us probably a year to get something back that we received from AirKit. And then, you know, we had this. We had the ability to do multi-channel communication out of the box. You know, we could text folks. I was looking at, before I left, IVR deflection. You know, we had a digital experience via the web, and then the integrations, right? Like at Reusability, we had integrations directly with Zendesk, and we were planning for you know, direct integration to our internal application that we're building out. And you know, the other one cool thing that I really liked with AirKit was a single communication thread across multiple channels. So you know, today, if something starts in Zendesk as an example, or via Zendesk as an example, via chat, it may not be integrated through to another next application. You know, when you go to the next agent, they're always wondering, hey, you know, what did this previous person talk about? And there's always that handoff. You know, anytime you call into a customer or contact center. So that was
kind of like Jeff, when you call the cable company, for example, and you call, get the operator on the phone, and they say, yeah, you know, there might be a service interruption, you know, let me send you a link to get that status up, you know, so you can keep getting a status update. You click on that link. It's a completely new conversation. You got to re-log in. You got to, like, you know, it doesn't kind of continue that conversation you just had with the rep. That's right. What we call, like, kind of a, you know, interrupted conversation versus, you know, what you're talking about, AirKit. You're able to have a single threaded conversation that's unbroken, regardless of, you know, if you're switching communication channels.
Correct. And John, since I talked about the reusability use case, do you want to talk about some other use cases that AirKit has? Yeah,
absolutely, Jeff. Thanks for queuing that up. You know, so reusability absolutely had a really impactful use case with service appointment scheduling, and we see other customers doing the same thing with not only service but sales. Like, we do everything from helping insurance companies, major insurance companies, schedule sales calls with their agents, and that's improved show-up rates and connection rates, to helping roadside assistance companies dispatch tow trucks more accurately and give their customers real-time updates with maps on where their tow truck is. We also have been pretty popular in terms of customer onboarding. So we have a customer, Skip the Dishes, which is the Canadian sister of Grubhub, where they all new restaurants that get on the platform have a digital flow for onboarding, and that's done through AirKit. We have some major Fortune 500 insurance companies where if you're applying for life insurance, that flow, all those 20 forms that you need to fill out, the appointments you need to book, the records you need to upload, that's all done and managed through AirKit as a single conversational flow that you can pick up and drop off and start and stop, and you don't lose your place. That we have retailers where folks are ordering like air purifiers. We have an air purifier company where folks used to call in and say, hey, where's my order? What's the status of my order? Or can I subscribe to filter replenishment? And that's all managed through AirKit. So any application across sales, service, and support where you would need to have communication with your customer, and there's some kind of action that your customer wants to get done, is a use case that AirKit can help you with. And it's not just about cost. In some of those examples, as I mentioned, Jeff, it's as you know, it's about increasing the top line, which is typically really popular with our champions in these companies. So, Jeff, thanks so much for sharing your story and telling us a little about how you thought about your journey. Dave, I'm going to kick it back to you, and we have a few minutes left for Q&A, right?
Absolutely, yeah, we do. I really enjoyed this discussion here, learning about how this really worked in the real world. It's always refreshing to see and hear about that. So thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing your story. We do have some questions, a lot of questions here coming in from the audience. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up a poll for everyone out there. I want to call your attention to. This says, what additional information would you like about the AirKit solution? And we'll leave that up while we do some Q&A. So first question I see here that came in, Luna is asking, how easy is it to build it or to build something? And is there any downtime during the build?
So I guess I'll take that. So so my background, so I do have a CS background, but I haven't coded in ages. I'm now building for AirKit, and I'm able to bring an app to pretty simple app together in a day or a couple hours. Like I talked about with our reusability case, I was building some other workflows. I could basically come up with the whole UI in one sit-down session. So that sit-down session would be like less than 2 hours. I can have something where I can view it. Obviously, part of the time that it does take additional time that it does take is integrations with API specifically. So like if you have accounting software that you may want to integrate to, as an example, like you would have to, if you have a development team, you would have to see if there was existing APIs available, and then making those calls to the APIs are pretty straightforward. So, some of our, John, I don't know if you want to talk to this, some of the times for us, once we bring a customer on board, it could be really short, it could be very long, just depending on how complex the application is.
Yeah, Jeff, typically what we've been seeing with customers, including you, is it's usually a matter of weeks. And a lot of that time is really just spent on mapping out what that journey looks like for the customer and coordinating with different groups. And so there's like this learning curve, and your first time is probably going to take you those few weeks, but then the next application and the application after that you build is a lot faster. And as Jeff mentioned, we consume a lot of APIs, and we build connectors for a lot of the most popular, because we are focused on customer experience as a low-code platform. We've built a lot of pre-built connectors into popular consumer platforms. So everything from like Salesforce, Zendesk, TalkDesk, which we just mentioned, to like Genesis in the call center, and to payment capture names like Stripe, to financial platforms like Plaid. These are all things that come out of the box and help you build faster. And then also on the other side, we talked about all the conversational channels. We want to make it easy for you to use text or phone, and so we've built connectors to all the conversational channels, like especially folks like Twilio, for example. You can get that up and going really quickly, and you don't even need to have your own instance of Twilio if you don't have one. So these are all part of the things that make building really easy and launching applications really easy.
Very nice. We need more easy. And that kind of brings me to a question from Mark, who's asking about, is there some sort of developer resource site where they could learn about all these integrations and connectors?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of technical resources on support.airkit.com. We're constantly building more inventory of more and more technical articles about how the platform works, how to do certain things in the platform. There's some videos on there as well. But I'd say we're just getting started, but there's a fair amount of content there. And I also see that there are folks who are interested in trying the platform. We'll soon be launching a really easy trial flow for people who want to have the ability to play around and check out the platform on their own. And that'll be free.
Very nice. Sounds like a great resource. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here in our live Q&A. There's a number of more technical questions there for you all in the queue. But thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, David.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, John. And thank you to the AirKit team. For more information, check out the link there in the Handouts tab. That will take you to the AirKit Definitive Guide to the AirKit low-code platform for customer engagement. You can download that resource and learn more about their solution. All right. Thank you, everyone who responded there to the poll question as well. We do appreciate that, and thank you for all the excellent questions. With that, it's now time to move on to our next presentation. I'm excited now to introduce Mr. Craig Tyriak, Vice President of Product Management at Scale Computing. Craig, how you doing?
Hey, David. It's been a while. How are you doing?
Yes, sir. Doing good. It's good to chat with you again. Good to have you on. Take it away.
Well, I appreciate you having me on today. Really interesting topic, and I think you're going to see a lot of different interesting takes on what modern applications are and how to enable them, how to support them. I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this than I think you'll see from some of the other vendors, and talk specifically around how we enable modern applications at the edge of the network. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of how and why I'm focusing on that. But before I get into that, let me tell you about who we are as a company. So we were founded back in 2008, primarily focused on small and medium-sized businesses and providing unified storage for those companies. It was an interesting time. I've been with the company for about 11 years now, and I've seen this really through a handful of transitions. The first one was from that initial storage product to a modern HCI product. So this was in 2012 when we first launched our HC3 product, and we brought together servers, storage, virtualization into a really easy to use product. Again, focused primarily on small and medium-sized businesses. The most recent transition that I can think of as a company here that we've gone through, though, was back in 2017 when we had a multi-billion-dollar grocery retailer reach out to us and kind of talk through some of the issues they were having at running applications at the edge of their network. And this is before edge computing was really even a term, I would say. But as they started to describe the problems that they were facing, you could almost go down the list of features and functionality and kind of core tenets in the design of the product we had created for the SMB is to say that at any individual site, they had a lot of the same needs and requirements that an SMB did. And there are some obvious differences in that we'll probably cover as part of today's presentation. But that transition that's happened since 2017, where we have started to focus more and more on distributed enterprises in these edge computing environments, I think is, number one, really interesting, but also number two, very relevant to today's conversation, where we're talking about how we enable some of these newer, cooler technologies and running them specifically at the edge of the network. This is probably a quote you'll see throughout today's presentation from many presenters, but Gartner's predicting that by 2025, more than 85% of global organizations are going to be running containerized applications in production. And I think that's really driven based on some of the key benefits that we list here. And I'll just kind of talk through them quickly. This is what we see when I'm talking to customers. I often hear them repeat this, but agile application development and deployment, containers just simplify so much of the developers' lives. There's a desire to rapidly and frequently deploy, and that's what containers are all about. Portability is another one that I commonly hear from developers, and that they want to have a unified experience across development, testing, staging, production, whether it's in the cloud or on premises, like we'll be talking about as part of this edge computing movement. Resource efficiency, another nice benefit. The smaller footprint containers allow for a much higher density, so you're increasing utilization. You've got the immutability of containers that really makes it highly repeatable to create and deploy these types of applications. And then finally, just the flexibility and choice. Kubernetes has really emerged, I would say, as the de facto standard for orchestrating containers. And you take that kind of API approach, the cross-platform consistency, combine that with the open source nature, and it provides just a lot of flexibility in deployment, either in bare metal or VM-based environments. Now, I've used the word edge computing, I don't know, probably 20 times in the last 2 minutes of talking here. So let me take a step back and define, when I say edge computing, this is what I mean. It really is anytime you are running mission critical applications outside of the four walls of the data center, and that could be a tier 1 data center that you host, or an MSP's data center, or it could be, cloud computing. Whatever that centralized piece is, it's something that's running on premises. And you can think of the edge as that physical location where things and people have to interact with the applications that you're deploying out there, and there has to be something that runs on. Another Gartner quote that I'll cite here, which is, in the last year or so, it's said that around 10% of enterprise-generated data is created and processed outside of that traditional data center or cloud. And by 2022, the expectation is this is going to jump to closer to 75%. And that is a massive jump. And what's really driving that is this IoT movement, I would say, beyond anything else, and some of these more modern applications that we're talking about here today. Now, we see at scale, we see 4 real reasons why people are moving toward this edge computing model, or trying to retain an edge computing model in some cases. And it falls in these buckets. It's data explosion, resiliency, latency, and regulation. And I think we've got a poll after this that we can kind of see what sorts of trends we have out on the call today. But I'll quickly talk about these before we get into the poll. The first one is data explosion. Really with a lot of these modern applications where you're using machine learning, AI, video analytics, computer vision, in a manufacturing environment where you're inspecting things on an assembly line, or maybe it's a retail environment where you have self-checkout. Basically anything where you're doing on-premises data analysis that requires a whole lot of data or really low latency to be able to make quick real-time decisions based on that data, maybe including a GPU as part of that, or places where transient data exists, where it's the longer tail on that data, the less valuable it is to the company. So you want to be able to make that real-time decision, and then maybe either delete the data or maybe only send the most important and pertinent things for modeling back to some kind of centralized cloud or data center. The other two that I have listed on here, resiliency and regulation, can sometimes go hand in hand. In fact, I was talking with a customer last week that is regulated by FEMA. It's a really interesting use case for requiring on-premises computing, but in their environment, they're required by federal law to, in the case of some form of a disaster, they need to be up and operational to serve the community around their retail site, which means that they need some level of, we listed here as resiliency, but you can almost think of it as autonomy of, I need to be able to operate in the event that I do not have solid access to the internet. Another example of this is that same customer, further in the conversation, mentioned that they had several remote sites that really the weakest part of their entire environment was that connection to the internet. And so in these remote sites where that's the case, you have to be able to run autonomously. So let me jump into the poll from here and just kind of ask the audience, based on those types of drivers that we see at scale computing for the need for edge computing, what of these, if any, and feel free to select all that apply, do you think really apply to your environment? I'll give it a second for these to start to come in.
Yeah, we'll share the results from this poll here. I'm curious to see the responses. As Craig said, this is a select all that apply question, so you don't have to choose just one.
Yeah, I'll say, David, one of the things I often do when I'm on a call with a customer is the very first time I'm talking to them, I'll bring up this exact slide and I'll say, what's driving your need for edge computing? Because in today's modern application, modern design, it's cloud first for a lot of things. Anytime you can get away from having to manage that infrastructure, you should probably try to do that. But there are legacy applications that sometimes have to remain on premises, or some of these newer, cooler, whiz-bang features and functionality that people are working on have to be run close to the data that they're generating. And it's really interesting to hear those stories like that FEMA one that I just told you from the conversation last week that I had. Just really uncovers a lot of interesting use cases.
Absolutely, and I'm glad to see, I don't want to skew the results here, but I'm glad to see that there that there is a huge demand, really, for edge computing just based on these results that we're looking at. So let me go ahead and share those now.
Okay.
And it looks like 38% on my screen said data explosion, bandwidth restriction, 36% resilience and autonomy, 31% latency. Those are really the top three. And so it looks like over 70% to 73% really have needs for edge computing out there. Craig, what do you think?
It's usually when I'm talking to a customer about this, there's like parts of every one of these that is their reason. So there probably is a lot of select all that happen in the results here, but not surprising to see them spread across all of them, to be honest. It's, we're talking data explosion and bandwidth restrictions. One of the applications that commonly comes to mind for me is video surveillance, where you're, having to make real-time decisions based on, the man with the red shirt's walking through the door at this second, what am I going to do? Or, dwell analysis in a retail environment, that type of thing, where you're having to make, very split-second decisions based on a whole lot of data, where you may, a video surveillance environment, maybe 5% of that data you'll ever have to go back to, but you want to keep that 5% if it's important, and so you need some level of ability to be able to say whether or not this is important, right? So some event has occurred, I need to mark that, and I only want to store this, long-term somewhere else. It's, just a lot of really interesting use cases. Appreciate everybody taking the time to fill that out. Well, kind of walking on from there, we've got, once you've decided that you need to run something on premises, and again, with 72% or more of you out there that are in this situation, hopefully you can relate to this. VMs are their thing. They're not going anywhere, but everybody's moving toward container-based or even Kubernetes-based deployments out there today. If you don't require orchestration and don't require multiple microservices working together, you can probably get away with just running containers. And for those of you that are already running infrastructure on premises where you have to run VMs or even bare metal, going the container route is fairly simple. You just want to make use of that existing infrastructure. We see that really commonly when you are already running VMs. And I'll happy to spend some more time on this, but my belief is that VMs are not going anywhere anytime soon. If IT has taught me anything in my history with it, is that legacy things tend to stick around forever. I mean, look at tape drives. Right? I don't know how many years in a row I've heard for the call of tape drives being dead, and yet everybody still uses them in some way, shape, or form. I would expect the same is going to be the case for legacy virtualization solutions. The other thing I'll say on here is that basically once you've decided that the application that you're deploying does require some form of an orchestrator, Kubernetes really has become the de facto standard. There are other options, but let's assume you're going to go that route. If you go that route, there are a handful of things to consider. You could build it yourself, kind of do a DIY Kubernetes cluster, either using bare metal or VMs. And that gives you ultimate control over every individual component. But of course, that comes with the cost of the human power involved to manage it and monitor and maintain that ongoing. So keep that in mind as you're making that decision. Distributed clouds is another really interesting one. Things like Google Anthos or AWS Outpost, they seem really easy at face value because they're offered as a managed service and they provide a lot of the same interface that public clouds provide. And you may be deploying that elsewhere, so that gives you somewhat of a seamless interaction between on-premises and cloud. But the thing that they don't necessarily call out is that leaves you with managing things like installing, upgrading, securing that base OS, planning the design and implementation of the underlying networking, deploying the storage solution that provides both the fault tolerance that you need for the application as well as the performance to run the workload. Those are all things that someone within your organization is going to have to take care of. And so just make sure you're going to that eyes wide open. The last group I would say here is the container management software, which kind of comes in a couple different flavors. You'll see some that are more ops focused, that are kind of vendor neutral when it comes to DevOps tool chains and application infrastructure software. And then there are others that are more developer focused that will just include those DevOps tool chains, a little more opinionated view as to what software to be used in that stack. But no matter which of these you choose, I think it's important to remember that has to run on some form of actual hardware. If you're going to run this on premises, it's not the cloud. There is something underneath that, underlying that you're going to have to manage, likely alongside those legacy applications. And when I say you there, I really mean someone within the organization. It's likely not going to be the DevOps team, or it's likely not going to be the developers themselves. In fact, when I talk to developers, really, when they're working on new applications, they want to make certain assumptions around the resiliency of the platform on which they're deploying, especially when it comes to persistent volumes where there's some requirement for something beyond stateless. This is where you want to be able to work with the infrastructure teams to make sure that it is designed in such a way that provides the resilience that you require for the application that you're running. And so that's kind of an open question you're going to want to make sure is answered before you go into whatever decision you make for that infrastructure on premises. Ultimately, when the DevOps team is setting up their CI/CD pipeline for deploying out at the edge of the network, that's a huge major point to consider. And it's not just how easy is it to deploy, but it's also the kind of what you need to do to minimize the overhead of managing that infrastructure at scale. Because it's not, if it's a centralized data center and you have just a single place, that's one thing. But when you're deploying at scale across hundreds of thousands of sites, you have to really make decisions that minimize the overhead of the care and feeding that system is going to require. Another thing to keep in mind is when I show on screen these pretty little graphics of servers and networking and storage, I can assure you the edge is anything but that. If you're looking at cloud computing or tier one data centers, you think of them as physically secure. They're well ventilated. They've got controlled HVAC. They've got redundancy and power with backup generators. Likely have IT personnel right there on site, ready to install or replace or just physically manage that infrastructure. And you think about the edge computing environment, it has none of that. There's nobody on site that has expertise in any of this, nor do you want to staff that. That's expensive. They could be going in next to some, I've talked to customers that are deploying these next to massive machines that are generating a ton of heat in a foundry. Talked with customers they're putting them, and this is somewhat of a stretch, but putting them over the fryer in a quick serve restaurant, a local fast food restaurant, or maybe just a small tower form factor that's sitting next to a point of sales terminal in a gas station or a retail outlet. Again, nobody on site has the technical expertise to manage that. There's no keyboard, video, or mouse anywhere nearby. So what we often see is that companies will engage in really expensive third-party contracts to be what I call the feet on the street. Somebody that you can call in the event of an emergency or in the event of just initial deployment to make sure that there's somebody that can provide that expertise, and that comes at a cost. So our view at Scale Computing is that edge requires simplicity. You need automation that can kind of keep systems up and running. They need to be autonomous. You need to expect failure and absorb those types of events, drive failures, node failures, what have you, to where you can abstract all the complexity of the infrastructure from the infrastructure team that has to manage it, but more importantly, the development and DevOps team that have to have entire ecosystems on top of that. Again, going back to the edge computing sites have no IT staff. of use is of utmost importance. And again, it's not just the ease of use of ongoing maintenance. You need zero-touch provisioning to be able to deploy these things without sending people on site, and they need to be done centrally and kind of managed remotely with ease. So probably not surprising to say, that's what we're providing in what we call HC3 Edge. So that whole kind of all of those core tenets and beliefs that we have as a company have been built into this product to provide simplicity, availability, scalability, affordability, and centralized control. And I could probably spend time on each of these if there are questions about them. I'll quickly go to our next slide. This is normally when I would say, hey, let me show you the system. Ease of use is easily said, but it really isn't seen until you're actually using the product and interacting with the data of your own sites, of your own infrastructure, to really recognize just how simple the system is to get up and operational. I could talk through, how easy it is to deploy a new site by just entering the IP address and the other relevant information into the centralized portal, and then turning on these nodes at the edge of your network and have them reach out and automatically orchestrated kind of the deployment of not just the infrastructure itself, but the applications that are running on top of that through APIs and other sort of orchestration tools on top of that. Again, though, it's easily said, it's way better seen, and I would invite you all to join us on one of our weekly demos where we can go through this in more detail with each of you, or just check out some of the videos online where we get into some of the details around the deployment and ongoing management of these. One of the things that is probably worth also pointing out is when you're talking about infrastructure, not every site is created equal. Not every customer deployment is created equal. Not every application is created equal, which means that you have to be able to mix and match node types. While you want to have a homogeneous way to interact with the infrastructure, you don't necessarily want homogeneous hardware and attributes at every individual site. And so flexibility becomes key in mixing and matching node types, and having various infrastructure footprints out of each of these sites becomes important. Another thing that I want to spend a little time on is, when I'm talking about simplicity, again, this is one of those things that's easy to say, but it's really hard to understand just how easy something is. And I'm going to spend a little time around autonomous infrastructure. Our chief product officer likes to beat me up on this probably on a weekly basis, where he tells me the best way to manage 10,000 sites is if they manage themselves. And what he means by that is that there has to be autonomy, there has to be intelligence built into the infrastructure itself if it's going to operate at scale across thousands and thousands of sites. So you've probably heard of what's called an OODA loop, where you observe, orient, decide, and act. And what we have built into HC3 is what we call an UMA loop. So we're observing, orienting, modeling, and acting. And that modeling really is key. It's through hard-won time in the field, understanding failure scenarios and coding solutions to those failures, and then testing them again in those kind of battle testing situations out in the field. We've learned a ton in the last decade or so of implementing this. And what you're looking at on screen is actually a fairly complex environment that is managed and kind of bubbles up just what is important. So at the very bottom layer, you have collectors, and these are things that are sitting on every node in every system that we've ever sold that are looking at just thousands and thousands of pieces of information. And then we orient ourselves. We decide, can we rely on this data through check values? And then and only then do those combine into setting conditions on the cluster. So if it's something like a temporary network issue, where there's a blip in the system, we're not necessarily going to set off a condition that says, hey, this is something you have to deal with. You can almost think of it, if you've heard the movement around AI ops, you can think of it in that manner, in that we're trying to intelligently decide what has to be done. And then we're using those conditions to feed two different things. One is the alerts that are coming to you as the person who might be managing, monitoring all these individual sites. But the second piece is these state machines. So cluster environments are really complex, and you have to understand how to navigate through these in such a way that it works in a clustered environment. So these state machines that we have built into the product are consuming these conditions, and they know what their current state is, they know what their desired state is, and they're able to safely navigate from their current state to that desired state. And only in a situation where it requires interaction with the team that's managing the infrastructure, then and only then, really, when you're getting alerts saying, hey, something has to happen here. Otherwise, the system itself will autonomously take care of itself. That's how we're able to tolerate failures, both at the node, the hardware level, as well as the software level. And also interesting as part of this is, I've been talking a lot about edge today. We're kind of eating our own dog food here. We use one of the first principles of edge computing in this offering, in that we're not just pumping all this log and telemetry data back to the cloud and trying to sort it all out there. We're doing the heavy lifting of, on-premises, the system's intelligently watching these logs and telemetry locally, and then only sending the useful information back to the centralized piece, which is what we call nucleus. So with that being said, I will say that, all of the intelligence we built in the system, all the simplicity really adds up into thousands of reviews out there from customers across a whole lot of segments, healthcare, manufacturing, education, state and local government, you name it, that kind of seen all the industries, and all of them have very common use cases around the needs for the infrastructure, which is why we've, solved a really key pain point for our customers. And I think that shows in the reviews that we've had out there. So Gartner, Peer Insights, Trust Radius, Tech Validate, Spiceworks, you'll name it. We invite you to go out there and read those reviews, and you'll see some common themes. One of the things that I often hear is the set it and forget it mentality, where people just put this infrastructure in place and they no longer have to worry about it anymore. The other thing you'll see is this thread through our support and services team, and just how fantastic our team that's based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, just how wonderful that team is in supplementing the actual product itself in such a way that it's a true partnership with our customers. And I think you can also talk to our customers directly about those, and really trusted by names that and a lot of names that you haven't seen before, I would say as well, in the last decade or more of having deployed all these. So with that, let me open it up to some of the questions that we've received.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Craig. I'm just going to bring up this poll
David.
question for everyone out there in the audience that we can leave up while we do some Q&A. What additional info would you like about scale computing? And I encourage everyone to respond to that. Lots of good questions coming in. Don't forget about our best question prize we're running as well. If you have a question on your mind, maybe that'll help, shake it loose. Craig, Jeff is asking, with scale, can you have more than a 3-node cluster?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think a lot of images that we had in there showed the 3-node cluster, because that's what provides the high availability. That's what provides rolling upgrades and a whole lot of other benefits that you get with kind of a multi-node system like there. But yeah, you can do, we have some customers that will do, maybe at some sites they'll have 3 nodes or 4 nodes or 5 nodes or what have you. Other clusters will have a single node. And making use of things like replication, disaster recovery to replicate their workloads from one site to another, or one cluster to another, and doing kind of a manual failover if that's required for their application. Great question.
Nice, yeah. And then another question here, they're asking about migration. If they have an existing compute and storage infrastructure, they're interested in moving to scale computing. What's the process, and how easy is that?
Another great question. Yeah, it depends on what applications you're running and kind of what the downtime or tolerance is for those applications. We've got several different tools in place. Probably the most predominant one is one we call HC3 Move, which for most Windows and Linux servers you can install, and it does kind of a byte-by-byte replication onto HC3, and then does the failover and kind of minimizes the impact downtime between those two systems. Most of the customers I would say that we talk to are coming from a VMware environment. There are a handful that are still actually coming from physical environments, but that tool will work across both. And then we have some built-in kind of free functionality that allows you to migrate workloads if downtime isn't an issue. And I would say that, while say 20% of the applications that are coming onto us have really, really high uptime and kind of are critical in nature, and you want to make sure that planned downtime that you have from migrating from one virtualization product like VMware onto HC3, the other 80% fall into that category of, when the time's right, we'll get that migrated over. And for that use case, that's where some of the free built-in tools work really well. But also, we've seen people that will take their current backup product and just convert it to kind of a bare metal restore on HC3 as well. So a lot of different options.
Excellent. And then, we're talking about application modernization here. What about an API? Does Scale have an API?
It does. I probably should have covered that earlier. Yeah, when you're talking about deploying thousands and thousands of these things out in the field, you can't expect somebody to manually have to go in and manage these and click around and creating new workloads and that sort of thing. It has to be programmatic. So we have built a pretty robust API that's well documented. The documentation itself is within the Scale user interface, but there's also a community of users out in the community.scalecomputing.com site, as well as GitHub, just some Python and other examples out there of how people are using the REST API.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A session, Craig, but there's a lot more technical questions for you there in the queue. Perhaps you can get back to some of those folks. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's always good to have you on. Thanks a lot, Craig.
Thanks, David. Take care.
And thanks to the folks at Scale Computing. Check out the handouts tab there. There is a link to the Guerrilla Guide Express to Enabling IT at the Edge. This is an Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide, a great ebook, full ebook that you can download there. 42 pages, fun resource. So make sure that you check that out before you go. And of course, visit scalecomputing.com for more information. And I'll just leave up that poll question for anyone who hasn't answered it while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to Adam Feltz from Georgia. Congratulations, Adam Feltz from Georgia. All right, and with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter. Welcome, Mr. Gijsbert Janssen van Doorn, Director of Technical Marketing at Zerto. Gijsbert, are you there?
I absolutely am. Great to be back.
Always good to have you, Gijsbert. Always look forward to your excellent presentations. Take it away.
Thanks. And thanks everyone for tuning in and spending time listening to us talk about modern applications. Now, luckily, the guest before me already kind of introduced Kubernetes, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on that. But I'm here to talk about Zerto for Kubernetes and what Zerto does for Kubernetes. For those who are not familiar with Zerto yet, I'll give you a quick intro, but it'll become really clear what we exactly do for Kubernetes-based applications. Now, Zerto for Kubernetes is actually really, really new. It's hot off the press. We just released it 2 days ago at our annual ZertoCon event, and with Zerto for Kubernetes, I would love to welcome Kubernetes to what we call the CDP party, the Continuous Data Protection Party. Now, we're a proud member of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. We're a silver member, of course, focused around our Zerto for Kubernetes product, but we are very happy that finally we can bring all the goodness of continuous data protection, which we still consider the protection technology for virtual machines and now also for Kubernetes. So let's first look at some of the challenges, especially from a, let's say, data availability, data protection perspective when it comes to Kubernetes. Now, Kubernetes by itself has very limited backup and recovery capabilities. Kubernetes itself includes some HA capabilities, but there's nothing really focused around disaster recovery, data protection, or even mobility, especially when looking at stateful applications. Now, the other challenge is when you start looking at data protection and trying to solve for data protection, you see that there's a lot of, especially in the market right now, there's a lack of purpose-built protection. A lot of the solutions out there, they use what we consider legacy technologies, such as, for example, snapshots. Whether that's from a storage perspective, we see a lot of vendors out there use their storage layer to protect the data, or whether it's snapshots based on Kubernetes' own framework. But if you consider continuous integration, continuous development, you really need to focus on continuous, and that's what really Zerto tries to deliver for Kubernetes right now. Now, the other challenge is that there's no real application-centric approach. Like I mentioned, some vendors out there deliver a Kubernetes platform and solve data protection from a storage level, but especially when looking at the applications developed on Kubernetes, persistent data must be protected, but also all related entities and config maps and services, so everything that makes up that application. And it's a challenge to find one solution that helps with all of those. And that's why we're introducing Zerto for Kubernetes. Now, Zerto for Kubernetes delivers our powerful and well-known continuous data protection engine to deliver continuous backup, disaster recovery, and long-term retention for Kubernetes applications that utilize persistent data, regardless of where they are running, on-premises, in the cloud, or at the edge. Now, at the GA release, we support the big platforms. So we support Azure Kubernetes Service. We support IBM Cloud Kubernetes Service. We support Amazon's EKS, Google's Kubernetes engine, and also support Red Hat OpenShift for those on-premises deployments. Now, as we continue the development, as we keep evolving Zerto for Kubernetes, more and more of those platforms will be added to Zerto for Kubernetes. We've got a few on the horizon already. Now, what is Zerto for Kubernetes? Now, the first thing and foremost thing is continuous data protection, using Zerto's technology to continuously protect that persistent data, those persistent entities within Kubernetes. And we really have that application-centric approach. We're not only protecting and recovering the data, because that's only part of the actual we also protect all the Kubernetes entities that make up that application. So think about config maps, think about stateful sets, deployments, secrets. So everything that makes up that application actually is protected and recovered as we protect those applications. Now, we have our well-known workflows in virtual machine world for failover testing, and mobility as well. Those same workflows are also available for Kubernetes. So you can easily fail over a application, test that failover, migrate it, restore it, and that's all built in. And we can do that across hybrid and multi-cloud deployments. So we can, for example, protect an application running on Red Hat OpenShift and use EKS in Amazon as a target for disaster recovery. So really giving you that multi-hybrid cloud experience. We deliver deep analytics with Zerto for Kubernetes. That means giving you insight in how the applications are protected, how much is protected, which are the entities that we protect. Now, of course, what's really important is we need APIs and built-in automation to support that DevOps way of working. And another key part of it is deep integration within the Kubernetes platform. So we call that data protection as code. Now, the only thing that needs to happen is make sure that the annotations are used in your deployments, in your development pipeline, and that ensures that the application is born protected. Born protected means that as soon as that application is deployed, as soon as the pods are created, they're also protected. As soon as those persistent volumes are used, they are protected as well. So what does that mean, continuous data protection? Now, for those of you that are familiar with the Zerto platform, continuous data protection is our consistent, automated, non-disruptive recovery method for applications. Now also Kubernetes applications, especially with their persistent volumes. And we can do that within Kubernetes clusters, across different Kubernetes clusters, data centers, or even clouds. So our continuous data protection delivers always-on replication, which is near synchronous replication with absolutely no production impact. We give you very granular recovery, allowing you to recover those applications and their persistent volumes from seconds ago. So you can go back 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, you name it. And you can all do that with no data loss or downtime. Because of that continuous replication, we can deliver RPOs of seconds, and because of those workflows that we have built into Kubernetes, so simple kubectl command, and you can fail over your application that delivers RTOs of minutes. So let's dig in deeper into some of those features. For example, data protection as code. It's purpose-built for Kubernetes. And it's declarative management, what you're used to from deploying an application on Kubernetes, but now for backup and DR. Let's take a closer look at the architecture. So the architecture is purpose-built for Kubernetes. That means every component of Zerto runs as a native Kubernetes component, as a pod. For anyone that knows our existing architecture, we use virtual replication appliances to scale out. Now, Zerto uses replication appliances on each and every worker node, so we don't need to do anything with the Kubernetes master. We just deploy a virtual replication appliance or replication appliance on each and every worker node using daemon sets. Now, they run as pods. They're small, they're lightweight, and they deliver that replication power. So if you have a lot of nodes, you'll have a lot of replication power out there. We run in our own namespace, and it's a very flexible deployment. So every cluster within Kubernetes will have what we call a Zerto Kubernetes manager, but a specific Zerto Kubernetes manager proxy. And that proxy actually delivers the management for that local cluster. If you add another cluster, that will have its own Zerto Kubernetes manager proxy, and they report into what we call the central Zerto Kubernetes manager. That can run on a third cluster somewhere, that can run on the same cluster, that can run on the remote cluster. And again, those clusters can be deployed across all the platforms we support. So that could be running in EKS, running on AKS, or on an on-premises OpenShift deployment, for example. Now, because of this scale-out architecture, we can really deliver protection at scale, regardless of the number of nodes, regardless of the number of pods that you're running. Because we scale with the environment and with all the nodes, we really deliver that scale-out architecture and that scale-out experience. And I think that's one thing that's clear, especially when looking at Kubernetes applications. We really give you the ability to scale on environments that expect the scale as well. Because with VMs, you have 100 VMs, 200 VMs, but in the end, containers or pods can run into the thousands, and it scales really fast. So scale is really important when you look at protecting Kubernetes applications. Now, how is Zerto for Kubernetes licensed? It's very straightforward licensing. So we license per 8 vCPUs on a worker node. There's no limit to how many clusters and nodes. You can easily scale up or scale out without actually affecting the licensing model. And we've got two examples actually displayed right here. We've got a 1 3-node cluster that has 32 vCPUs per node. Basically, that means you need to license 96 vCPUs, so that results into 12 licenses. If you have smaller but more nodes, but still have the same vCPU count, you still need that same 12 licenses. So it's a really straightforward, transparent licensing model. You can consume them either on a perpetual or subscription base, and there's two versions. One is ZDP, Zero Data Protection. The other one is Enterprise Cloud Edition. ZDP is really focused on the backup/data protection use case, so basically protection within one cluster. ECE gives you the full suite of capabilities, so replication to a remote cluster, long-term retention, across all the different platforms that we support, so really giving you that full power of Zerto. Let's quickly summarize. So why Zerto for Kubernetes? Why is Zerto for Kubernetes so important? Well, one, if you're continuously delivering an application, if you're continuously changing an application, you need that continuous availability. You need to deliver that always-on customer experience for cloud-native apps as well. And using a platform like Zerto to deliver protection, mobility, that really gives you the operational efficiency. You can streamline those resources, unify the DevOps and the infrastructure and operation teams by collaborating and by delivering them a platform that allows them to consume protection and giving the I&O teams the assurance and the confidence that the new applications, regardless of where they are developed and deployed, that they are protected. But also giving you that multi-cloud agility. It's not a single cloud world, especially not in those modern applications. And Zerto gives you the ability to protect workloads to, from, and between on-premises and clouds as well. So really giving you that flexibility, that freedom of choice. Now, how can I experience Zerto? How can I experience Zerto for Kubernetes? Now, Zerto has hands-on labs available. If you go to zerto.com/labs, you can test drive Zerto for Kubernetes yourself. We've got hands-on labs. You simply deploy it. It actually deploys a cluster on Amazon Kubernetes service or solution and allows you to just play with it yourself, deploy an application, protect it, fail it over, restore it. Of course, we've got the instruction itself based. You can test it for a couple of hours. No infrastructure needed on your side. Want to learn more about Zerto for Kubernetes itself? Just read and see what Zerto can do for you on our zerto.com/Zerto for Kubernetes website. Or you want a live tailored demo and see it in Z4K in action. Z4K is our abbreviation of Zerto for Kubernetes. Just contact a Zerto expert and get in touch with us at sales@zerto.com. We'll be happy to connect you with a Z4K expert that takes you through the full experience of Zerto for Kubernetes and shows you exactly what you can do with Zerto for Kubernetes. And actually, all that's left for me to do right now is thank you very much for your attention. And hopefully there are some questions out there that I can answer.
Absolutely, yeah, great presentation. Gijsbert, we do have some questions for you. While we do that, we're just going to bring up our poll, as we always do, for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about Zerto, whether it's Zerto for Kubernetes or Zerto to protect VMware, any sort of Zerto product? We would appreciate your feedback there in that poll. So let's see, first one that I wanted to ask you, and by the way, I'm excited about this solution because I'm a big fan of Kubernetes. So I'm excited to hear that you guys have Zerto for Kubernetes, or I need to use the acronym Z4, is it Z4K 8?
Okay.
Or
yep,
Z4K. Okay, perfect. First question here, aren't most container-based workloads considered stateless?
I think at first, I think yes, that was the first step. And I'll throw a strong personal opinion out there. I don't think stateless exist. I think there's maybe state you don't care about, but everything has a state. But what we see more and more is that more and more enterprises adopt it. Actually, a great metric that the previous presenter gave, like 85% of the organizations by 2025 will use containerized applications, something like that. Like as enterprises start adopting containers and using containers, it will store persistent data within those applications because the data is what really makes that application. So yes, I think it started out as something stateless, but with Kubernetes evolving, getting traction, building in those things like persistent volumes to deliver that stateful experience, we see more and more a stateful deployment being done.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I mean, I guess I kind of see stateless as the low-hanging fruit almost, kind of like with virtualization. You know, it's like, well, look, we can spin up 5,000 web server containers. That's cool, but you know, what about our production workloads? Maybe that's not the ideal picture of our production workloads. So it's great to see that more stateful, you know, solutions are around here for containers. Next question: does Zerto support VMware Tanzu?
So actually, that's on our short-term list. That's one of those platforms that we'll support very soon. I think it's Tanzu, it's Rancher. We get a lot of questions about Rancher as well. Those are other platforms that we're looking at supporting fairly quickly.
Very nice, very nice. And then next question: what are the trends that you see with regards to persistent data? We talked about that a little bit, right? trends around persistent data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the trend we see right now, it really made its evolution through that whole Kubernetes uprising. So first, we saw a lot of the persistent data actually exist in VMs, and those VMs were hosting database services. Now, Zerto has a great solution for that as well, right? To protect virtual machines. We've had that since 2011. We also see a lot of those applications use database as a service deployments within the cloud, like DynamoDB or RDS in Amazon or SQL in Azure. But what we see right now is that a lot of organizations are actually adopting the database engines that run as containers, and that allows them to really scale quickly and really make not only all the microservices and front end engines that they use part of that CI/CD pipeline, but also the database engines, and that allows them to really pick the database engine that they require that fits their needs, but also make that part of how they deploy and how they update and how they continuously deliver that application. So we really see a lot of database engines being moved into the containers, utilizing things like, for example, persistent volumes, really segregating those DevOps from the more traditional I&O roles that you have right there. And I think that, to me, that would be really the next step and something that we see continuously moving forward and getting more and more popular.
Excellent. It's great to see that kind of maturity of Kubernetes and all the products in the ecosystem. Next question here, Deb is asking, can I create specific data retention policies around the Kubernetes data that I'm protecting?
Absolutely. You can use Zerto's journaling technology and Zerto's long-term retention technology that you're used to from our VMware or VM-based solution, and we can deploy those same SLAs and retention policies on Kubernetes applications as well.
Very cool. And so if folks want to get started with this exciting new Zerto solution, Zerto for Kubernetes, what do you recommend? I'm excited to try out these labs for myself.
Yes, I think that's a great first step. Get hands-on with Zerto for Kubernetes. It's a great experience. I'm receiving fantastic feedback. Now we released this 2 days ago. We already see an uptake and we've actually used our hands-on labs as a beta platform as well to let our customers and prospects experience it and test with it and play with it and give us feedback. And I'm getting a lot of positive feedback about that. And I think if you really want to, that's what we see, especially with the DevOps audience. They want that hands-on experience. That's the best first step to do.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A. I put some more technical questions there for you in the queue, Gijsbert, to respond to if you have time for that. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you for having me, David. It was great.
And I encourage everyone to, of course, respond there to the poll still, and also check out the handout that's available for download in your audience console on the new Zerto for Kubernetes solution. Exciting stuff here today on the EcoCast. It's now time to introduce you to our next presenter. I'm excited to welcome Mr. Josh Goldenhar, Vice President of Product Marketing at Lightbits. Josh, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, great to have you, Josh. Take it away.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for being out there, and let's shuffle you off onto the next. So I'm here to talk to you today about supporting and enabling modern applications with LightOS. Lightbits is the name of the company. LightOS is our product, and as you've heard from some other presenters, when we're thinking about modern applications, most people are thinking about Kubernetes and containers. Of course, there's various different versions of Kubernetes, the pure version, or using different distributions such as OpenShift, Longhorn, but we'll cover basically different versions of that. So what we're going to present to you today is LightOS, which is basically cloud's native storage made easy. And thought it might be good to lead off with a couple of fun facts about Kubernetes. In case you didn't know, that Kubernetes is Greek. It's a Greek term for helmsman or pilot, which, you know, if you think about it, it's pretty cool. It's kind of leading the orchestration of all these different containers. Its development was done and heavily influenced by a previous project at Google that they called the Borg system. And when you think about it, that's also actually appropriate because Kubernetes does seem to be eating the world and taking over everything. And of course, the code name for Kubernetes itself was Project 7, which, if there are any Star Trek fans out there, was named after 7 of 9. And that led to the 7 spokes on the wheel of the Kubernetes logo that are a reference to its original code name. So all sorts of little Easter eggs around this, just some kind of fun stuff to lead this off, make it hopefully a little less boring and a little bit interesting for folks out there. So let's talk about modern applications in the Kubernetes container space. It was designed for stateless applications originally. Microservices, another term you hear thrown around like that. And the philosophy was to be able to freely scale up or down without the need for data redistribution because everything was really stateless. There wasn't any data that needed to be persistent. And that is, these applications didn't need to save their state upon exit, and hence there was no reason to go ahead and restore anything at startup. The services just kind of start up and counted on each other, and there wasn't any need for persistence of data. But then people found out that the ease of managing pods or collections of services really made this, that is Kubernetes, an ideal candidate to manage some stateful applications as well. And hence we get a lot of interest now in folks doing stateful. And what's a stateful application? Well, it's the opposite of what we saw before. It's things that do need to maintain their state from instance to instance, that when they shut down, they need to save that state, and when they start up, they need to go ahead and have that state available. And to put it in simpler terms, you can think of things like databases. The databases have to make changes to persistent storage, and you don't want to lose that data when it starts up somewhere else. You want to have that database ready to go. And so many of these cloud-native applications have the same philosophies as Kubernetes. You want to scale by adding instances. You want application and hardware portability. You don't want to have applications tied to specific hardware. And lastly, it's not just about containers anymore. If you look at kind of the direction that Red Hat OpenShift has gone and advances in KubeVirt, you can have legacy applications, that is VMs, that are an entire system image. They can run in the Kubernetes framework under KubeVirt. So it's exciting about that. So basically you can get the benefits of Kubernetes orchestration and container orchestration and movement and all this kind of management. But if you still have to run some legacy apps in a VM, you could go ahead and run this as well. And of course, if you're using VMware, you can already do this. And if you're running your containers, you'd run under Tanzu. This is just a sampling of some of the applications we're talking about. So if you have these in your environment, or you're thinking about these, you may be also considering putting them under container management. So all sorts of databases, SQL, NoSQL, in-memory, different analytics frameworks, such as Apache Spark, Elasticsearch, and of course stream processing, Apache Kafka, RabbitMQ. And basically all of these things, what they share in common is they say that to get the best performance, you really should use local flash. And of course, there's no flash faster than NVMe for being a local flash storage solution. So in essence, they're saying what you should really do on all your application servers is have local flash available. And most of these applications will go ahead and protect the data themselves by doing replicas over the network. And usually that's a 3x replica. Let me hit my keyboard, that doesn't work. So what it would look like is this. In your environment, you'd see that green row of servers is just application servers. Every one of them has a local NVMe flash drive, orchestration by Kubernetes, and the applications themselves perform very, very well because they're getting the low latency and high bandwidth of a local NVMe drive. So really, you're hurting yourself by kind of tying to physical hardware. And lastly, then you're also tied to any hardware that does have an NVMe drive. It can be very expensive to put these drives on every single host. So that might mean that there's only certain systems that can go ahead and take your load. So overall, what this results in is if you go ahead and put drives on every single host, you get really poor utilization. We see levels as low as 15 to 25% across the fleet. This is because if you put a drive in every single host, some human being has to make the determination on what size drive that is. And you don't want to pick too small because then what do? You have to add maybe a second drive and add some software to link the two together. It's not good. You really want a virtualized drive, but this is a physical asset. So generally what people do is they pick a drive that's larger than they need, which of course leads to a lot of waste, and why we find in these fleets, it's very common to have 15 to 25%. We have one customer who actually said that their utilization rate across the fleet was as low as 5%. So very, very poor utilization, and these are expensive devices. So you want to get as high as you can on a utilization chart. And the other thing people don't normally think about is you're also wasting performance. NVMe drives can do as much as 500,000, some can do 800,000 IOPS. But typically, a server is going to use somewhere between 100 and 300K IOPS. So if you're only using half of what the drive can do, you're not only potentially wasting capacity, you're also wasting performance. And you paid for all that, so you want to get the best you can. Lastly, people say, okay, I get all that. I don't want to do, I'm not going to do local drives. I'm going to go ahead and use a network-based persistent storage solution. And many out there exist. Ceph as open source is very popular to do. There's a lot of iSCSI-based solutions. There's some proprietary solutions, various file system products, etc. But precious few of these actually offer local flash performance. They don't even come close. So your trade-off there is you get the convenience of centralized management and better utilization, but you get relatively poor performance. Those that do offer very high performance usually don't have any data services, and maybe not even data protection. They might do replication, but you're really still dealing with drive failures across the network and no data services, so you don't have anything like snapshots and clones, etc. Lastly, a lot of these, to get this local performance, do use proprietary drivers, or they use standard drivers such as Rocky, to like a NVMe over Fabrics with the Rocky protocol, but that requires some changes in your network. So whatever you do, it seems like you're always compromising. To get you an idea of what is that compromise, a lot of people choose Ceph because Ceph is free, as in free beer, but there's always a catch. And the catch is this data was taken directly from a testing that Red Hat did in conjunction with Intel, using Optane media as the metadata layer, so the fastest basically you could use other than just doing a RAM disk, and then using Intel NAND SSDs for the actual data pools, and using very, very high-end platinum-grade Intel processors. So this is the best performance that Red Hat could go ahead and get. And you guys can look this up. It's on part of the Ceph or Red Hat Ink Tank blog. And look at the results here. We're aiming for getting under 200 microseconds of response time from local flash or from our product, from LightOS. And the best here is 3,000 microseconds or 3 milliseconds average read latency. So this is nowhere near local flash. In fact, we have one edge customer who said their whole goal was to only get to 3,000 microseconds or 3 milliseconds response time on average, and they couldn't even get that out of Ceph. But they were also not willing to use the very, very, very top of the line hardware because it became much too expensive. You can see the estimated cost here. This was 5 servers, is $185,000 for the hardware only. So this is very expensive to get these kind of results. And then again, these results are not necessarily very impressive. So what's the story here, or the moral? Is that persistence is not enough. Not just sheer persistence. Lots of things offer you persistence, but that doesn't necessarily fit the bill. You need a lot of other things. For all these different modern applications, you need high bandwidth. You need high IOPS. And high levels of IOPS are easy to achieve with massive parallelization, but you also need low latency because not everything can be parallelized. What you'd really like is to work on standard TCP/IP networks. You don't want to add special drivers. You don't want to have to change the way you configure your switches, the way you do port bonding, et cetera. You want to use standard TCP/IP networks and practices. You'd love this storage to still have rich data services. You want to support various configurations of hardware. And of course, you want this to be software defined. That's what we're marching toward. Modern applications imply also a modern data center. And modern data centers are made of servers where you use software defined methods to turn those servers into other things that used to be hardware boxes. Going down to lower TCO, of course, you want to improve costs, which means you'd like to use QLC NAND. But QLC NAND has some issues in the way it works, that you can't just use it out of the box, especially you can't use it locally, or else you're going to wear it out if you do a random workload. You'd like to improve flash utilization, and of course you'd like to have your independent scaling of storage versus compute. There are a lot of native Kubernetes solutions for storage that say that, hey, that's our thing. We're native. You manage it just like everything else. You run it in a container. And that's great if what's most important to you is just how you provision storage. But when you actually use it, you don't want your storage to be a noisy neighbor. You don't want someone else impacting your CPUs by stealing CPU cycles from the system because it's using your storage. You don't want poor performance. So it's nice to be Kubernetes native, but that's not necessarily the end-all be-all if you need performance, if you need advanced features. So we talked about this a bit, so we won't spend too much time on it. You might get persistence, but you eliminate, if you use a local persistent volumes, you eliminate the benefits of using Kubernetes orchestration. That is, you're tied to certain physical servers. And network solutions tend to be too slow. They break with the practice of Kubernetes, which is portability, or have special block drivers, or require special NICs. You're right, you might need an RDMA NIC. And they require the applications, alternatively, to protect their own data. And wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to have the application do also all the data protection? Because when it's doing that data protection, it's stealing CPU cycles. You're not using it for your application. You're using it for something the storage used to do. So the LightOS solution that we're offering looks kind of like this. You keep your Kubernetes stack. We have, of course, a LightOS CSI driver, which works with the standard NVMe over TCP block driver to go ahead and work on the same kind of networks that iSCSI does. If you like iSCSI, if you like the simplicity of iSCSI, but you wish the performance was better, you can run LightOS because you use standard TCP/IP practices. It runs on any NIC. You don't need any special NICs. You can run all these different container applications. And then you have dedicated LightOS target servers that these are dedicated to storage, which means there's no noisy neighbor problem. They perform at very, very high levels of IOPS, very low latency, below 200 microseconds on average speeds, and that's even under load. And because they're dedicated target servers, you don't have any noisy neighbor problem. You're going to get the performance that you paid for out of those NVMe drives by serving your cluster with these dedicated servers. It looks a little bit like this when you actually do a diagram, what it looks like on the network. You have your compute hosts, the Kubernetes worker nodes that are over there on the left with the CSI driver. You can run whatever containers you want. The kernel itself comes with the NVMe over TCP driver. This is a completely standards-based driver. As again, as said before, it runs on any NIC. This could run on a 10 gig NIC, a 25, 100, a 40. It could even run on a 1 gigabit NIC, although your bandwidth is going to be pretty low. And everything you know and love about TCP/IP works out of the box. You can still do port bonding. You could do MLAG between switches if you want redundancy. All the knowledge that you have built up in TCP/IP and how to do a network stays consistent when you do NVMe over TCP. Then on the right side, you'd have dedicated LightOS servers. And these are a cluster that starts as little as 3 hosts. That can go today up to 16 hosts, with more in the future, but today you can go to 16 hosts, and this can result in 8.3 petabytes of usable storage in a single cluster. So we're talking pretty big storage sizes, all on standard hardware, and at very, very high performance levels. A single cluster could go as high as 50 million IOPS if that's what you wanted. So this is very dynamic, environment friendly. It scales up with your environment. You can go ahead at any time. You can add more drives to existing LightOS servers. You can go ahead and add servers at any time to the cluster to go ahead and grow the cluster, and we will automatically rebalance in the background. I mentioned before, it uses any NIC. Your choice of Linux kernels, NVMe over TCP is standard in more and more kernels as time goes on. Multipath works just great. It works via something called asymmetric namespace access, which is part of the NVMe spec. Or you can do standardized port bonding, and your switch configurations don't need anything special. Mentioned this about scaling up and scaling out. So again, with a LightOS server, you can start with a smaller number of drives and add drives over time. You can do this live, and we go ahead and grow the size of our internal RAID groups that protect against drive failures. You can add drives 1 at a time, or you could add 12 at a time. That's up to you. If you run out of space in one server, you can go ahead and grow the size of the cluster. So you can add cluster nodes at any time. You start with 3, and then you go ahead and add whenever you want. up to 16. And you get all this without sacrificing rich data services. So we're software defined on standard servers, but all volumes are thin provisioned. You get line rate compression that's configurable on a per volume basis. You get data protection settings on a per volume basis. You can expand volumes. So if we go back to thinking about a physical drive, it performs like a local physical drive. But if it's too small, you can go ahead and make it bigger. And all volumes can have snapshots, which are read-only for us, and clones. Snapshots can be turned into clones, which you can think of as read-write snapshots. And all of these are thinly provisioned, meaning that when you do a snapshot, it's nearly instantaneous. And of course, it doesn't use any size, any space on the NAND until the parent starts changing. And all of this is with a very low latency, consistent response time. It's under 200 microseconds for reads and under 300 microseconds for writes. Lastly, we're going to help you reduce TCO. And how we do this? Well, we enable QLC Flash. So those of you who are not familiar with QLC Flash, it is the cheapest current tier of Flash, which is nice from a cost point of view. But it does have some trade-offs there. QLC has relatively low endurance. That means you can wear it out fairly quickly. And you can especially wear it out quickly if you write to it in a random small block pattern. So it's not recommended to do that. Now, if you're doing some kind of service, you don't know what your clients are going to use. So you don't want to take the chance they're going to wear these drives out. LightOS can increase the endurance of QLC by up to 5 times. And that's because we take random writes. We serialize those writes before we write it out to NAND. And we're always writing to this NAND flash in large blocks, and we write sequentially. So therefore, it doesn't matter how random your workload is or how many hosts you have hitting these target storage servers. What appears to be a random workload will end up completing in a non-volatile write buffer. It'll go ahead and get written out to the flash in sequential mode in large blocks. So it treats QLC the way QLC wants to be treated. And actually, it's a sequential write pattern that goes to the SSDs themselves. And the SSDs perform much better with a sequential write pattern than a random one. So this is going to save you money by being able to use much less expensive NAND. We do have the same philosophy as Kubernetes about failure domains. So we support full failure domain support. In this example, we're showing 3 different racks, a cluster of 6 LightOS target nodes. They're spread over the 3 racks. And when we go ahead and do our replication in the background, we protect against drive failures locally in each host. So that doesn't impact your network for a drive failure. But for a complete node failure, or in this case, you could even have a rack failure, because we're going to spread the replicas over the different failure domains. Your failure domains could be defined as different racks, different power zones, different rows in the data center. Whatever you want to go ahead and tag the node with, you put it in different domains, and we'll make sure when we do replication that we go ahead and replicate between different domains, so you can go ahead and have a complete failure domain setup. Mention this a lot, so those of you who have this information or see it on your screen, this was, again, the complete test versus Ceph that was optimized by Red Hat with Intel's help versus LightOS. And you can see that we can do much more work in only 2 LightOS target nodes than you could with a cluster of 5 OSDs. So this is going to save you an immense amount of money, while at the same time getting far, far better performance. You see these numbers are crazy lower latency and many, many more IOPS for far less investment in hardware. So in summary, what do you get when you have a modern application situation or environment such as Kubernetes? You get complete application portability. You can go ahead and move the pods to any hosts, and your data effectively moves with your compute. So you don't have to worry about where you go ahead and put compute or containers, because your data is going to be available over the network. It's going to perform still like it's local via CSI. And drive failures are handled seamlessly. So we have this thing called elastic RAID on the targets, that when a drive fails, we rebuild it locally on the host, meaning we're not flooding your network with rebuilds if drives fail, which is the most likely thing to go ahead and fail. You can specify compression and replication on a per logical volume basis. And of course, you get independent scaling of compute and storage resources. So with that, a big thank you for listening, and we will move to Q&A. If you want more information, of course, you'll have some opportunity to select what you'd like, but you can also always find us at lightbitslabs.com or send email to info@lightbitslabs.com.
Great presentation, Josh. Really cool stuff you guys are doing at Lightbits. I bet this is something that a lot of folks, might be new to them. So really cool way of presenting it. And we do have some questions for you coming in. I'm just going to bring up this poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Lightbits Lab solution? And we'll leave that up while we do some Q&A. So let's see, good feedback. Beth said, thank you. James said, thank you. Nathan said, amazing product. Question here from Ned. He's asking, when it comes to protecting the data stored, in the LightOS solution, what about backup and disaster recovery? Is that part of this, or would you use just a tool that you already have?
You can do a little bit of both. So I think it says, how does this solution protect against a ransomware attack? Is one of them. We're happy to say that we announced the availability of snapshots and clones in our 2.2 release, which was released last month. And so with snapshots supported under the CSI driver as well, snapshots for us are read-only. So if you're on a regular basis and you can schedule them, if you go ahead and schedule snapshots, this means that if you do have any kind of attack or a data failure or just someone made a mistake, you can go ahead and revert a volume at any time to any snapshot. Or if you didn't want to do that, if you didn't want to revert the volume, you could go ahead and take any one of those snapshots and then make it a read-writable clone. So that would actually take this volume and take a secondary volume away that is still thin provision related to the parent, but now that clone would be in the status it was when the snapshot was originally taken, and you can go ahead and verify that your data was there and everything's good before actually reverting. So you do have different methods. Now on the other hand, because we are just a block device and you can attach to any container, there are native methods you can do with tools that are built in to the Kubernetes ecosystem or available from third-party vendors. I don't know that we're saying anything good or bad about other third parties, but there are tools out there that we would work in this ecosystem to do backups, point-in-time recoveries, or also business continuance and things like DR. So you could use a combination of both.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. Let's see, another question here. They said, you talked a lot about Kubernetes. What about legacy bare metal or virtualized environments? Could those work with this solution?
Yeah, absolutely. As I kind of touched on it, but you can't move everything. So a lot of enterprises that are trying to move towards Kubernetes say, you know what, we have in our stable 3,000 or 6,000 applications. There were some banks I was talking to on the East Coast recently. And so they said, even if we ported an application a week, it will be, years, if not our lifetime, before we can move all these. So sometimes it makes sense to leave legacy applications as VMs or running on bare metal. And we absolutely support bare metal and VMs in a this kind of legacy mode. It's like a new age SAN. So instead of using fiber channel, you're using Ethernet and TCP/IP. You're going to get better performance. And quite frankly, if you're using Ethernet, your per port cost is going to be about half that of fiber channel 32, yet you're going to be 3 times the bandwidth if you're using 100 gigabit. So we absolutely support bare metal. Many of our customers, if not most actually, in kind of the CSP space, are running bare metal. And we'll have some interesting news about supporting VMware environments before the end of the year.
Cool stuff. A lot of options there to leverage this, incredible performance that you're talking about. And so that actually brings us to the next question. You talked about performance, but you didn't say specifically what the performance is. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what kind of performance we could get out of this?
Yeah, the performance for us, if you tune the tune, that means if you buy a server, because we are supporting any kind of server. If you buy a server that's got a good number of cores, you can go ahead and have something that can give you over 3 million random read IOPS per server and over 800,000 random write IOPS. These are 4K IOPS per server. And we are a clustered solution. So that's how I get to, if you did an entire 16-node cluster at a maximum configuration, you could get close to 50 million random read IOPS. Whatever 800,000 is times 16 is what you'd get in write IOPS. And all of this, even under load, is very, very low response time. So 200 and 300 microseconds, respectively, for reads and writes. So it's relatively very high performance for enterprise. And this performance is what you get regardless of if you have snapshots and clones. If you use snapshots or clones and you're accessing them, you get those same levels of performance. So it doesn't really matter what you do to the cluster. You're always going to get this high IOPS, low latency option.
You know, that's some incredible performance. I bet there's a lot of folks out there like grabbing a Post-it note and a pen and writing this down. Wait, did you say 15 million IOPS at microsecond response?
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So when you talk about the solution,
and by the way, though, you just said 15. I said 50. So we can get 50 million IOPS out of a cluster.
50 million IOPS.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yep.
I'm writing that down myself. So when you talk about this solution, are you all selling hardware or software, or do we bring our own hardware? How does that work?
It's meant for you to have the capability to bring your own hardware. So we do, for convenience only, we OEM Dell systems. So we have something we call Super SSD, which if it's convenient for you, you can buy that from us, but you're in no way required to do so. You can definitely bring your own hardware, and we have a guide that helps you pick, what the configurations of the hardware is, and help you figure out what the kind of performance you'd expect from that. So you can use the server vendor of your choice, or if you want to, you can buy systems from us that are backed by Dell quality and a Dell next day, on-site support service contract.
Nice. And then what's the licensing model around this?
The licensing model is per server, so it's pretty easy. We didn't want to be one of those folks that charge you per capacity because we want to give you the option. This is your hardware, and if you want to swap out all your 4 terabyte drives for 8 terabyte drives, you don't owe us any more money. So we license on a per target server basis, and that's basically it. It is a subscription license. So you go ahead and pay on an annual basis. There's significant discounts for buying multiple years up front. But that's about it. It's on a per server, and it's actually very affordable. We find people actually telling us that you guys are kind of cheap, especially for the performance we offer. So we invite everyone to go ahead and ask more info on that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our live Q&A here, but a really cool presentation. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Josh.
Okay, really appreciate it. Thanks everyone out there for listening, and we'll go ahead and finish up some of these questions in the actual window. So hopefully we'll get you guys answered.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And I want to encourage everyone out there to check out the resource that's available for download there in the Handouts tab. It's a solution brief on the Lightbit solution, Kubernetes and LightOS performance, persistence, and simplicity. So make sure that you check that one out before you go. And with that, it's time now for our next Amazon $500 gift card drawing. I'll leave up the poll question there for everyone to respond to while we do this. This is going out to Ricky Hudson from Arkansas. Congratulations. Ricky Hudson from Arkansas. Still another gift card to give out on the EcoCast today, so make sure you stay tuned for that. All right, and with that, it's now time to move on to our next presentation on the EcoCast. I'm excited now to welcome Basir, Senior Technical Marketing Engineer at Gigamon. Basir, thanks for being on. Take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. My name is Basir Balazare. I am a Senior Technical Marketing Engineer with Gigamon, and for the last 5 years, my focus has been around the cloud. So in today's presentation, we'll talk about visibility in the cloud, and then we'll talk about how we do that in a container space. Okay, let's get started. Before we get a little bit deeper, let me describe who I am, a little background of myself. I've been in IT for about 15 years. I used to manage data centers. I used to run corporate IP departments. I worked for a Fortune 150 company. I worked for Fortune 100 companies. I've been employee number 46 at a startup. So I've done very, very large, I've done very, very small, and in between. And so one of the things that stands out the most for me is when developers will ask me to provide them access to compute. It will take anywhere from 9 to 12 months to do that. And now it's literally you swipe your credit card and you have unlimited access to unlimited everything on a global scale using one of the public cloud vendors. And so Today, I'll talk about some of the challenges around that and specific around containers and what it is and how Gigamon can solve that for you guys. So actually, this slide is a summary of what it is I just said, moving to the cloud very quickly and rapidly, having access to everything. But it becomes challenging, right? The challenging part of it is just because you're using somebody else's hardware and you're renting from them, it doesn't mean that your responsibility goes away. It's still your job to make sure that whatever security that you had in your data center, it still applies in the public cloud space. And one of the things that the cloud vendors have is this idea of the shared responsibility model. And what that means is they will make sure that they are taking care of the actual compute. So basically, they're responsible for of the cloud. You're responsible of what's in the cloud. And so this happens with all the cloud vendors. And so this becomes a challenge, and this is a challenge that Gigamon is able to solve. So if I show this slide, this talks about how this is life without Gigamon, right? So you have your infrastructure, you got all the typical network stack that we're all used to seeing, the firewalls, the routers, the switches, the virtualization farm, and probably a lot of cloud. And I would imagine most of you guys have probably become SaaS managers, right? You're managing Office 365, you're managing Gmail, you're managing Dropbox, so different SaaS solutions. So IT has become basically SaaS managers in my world. All right, so this is the challenge that Gigamon sees, and so let's see how Gigamon is able to resolve this. So what Gigamon does is we acquire the traffic from the different layers of your network stack. So it could be the virtual layer, it could be the physical layer, it could be the public cloud layer. So no matter which layer, we have the ability of getting actual raw packets from that environment. So layer 2 through layer 4 raw packet visibility. And then once we get that, we bring it into something, our visibility analytics fabric. And so this is where we do the NL, and so the first thing is getting access. The next thing is the aggregation. The third thing is the transformation. And so what does this mean? What does transformation mean? Transformation means that since we're acquiring the traffic from multiple locations, we're bound to see the same packets over and over and over again. So rather than sending multiple copies of the same packet to the tools, let's just send one copy. And so what this does is this lowers the fire hose that's being sent over the tools. And then so rather than tools having to spend their CPU cycles dropping the things they don't care about, Gigamon could do that. Another thing that we could do, Gigamon does, is the filtering capabilities. So let's say you have a web application firewall, a WAF. It all really cares about is TCP port 443 or 80, right? It doesn't care about any of the traffic that's on your network. So why bombard it with a bunch of stuff it doesn't need to see? Let's filter the relevant traffic to send over to the tool. Now this slide gets a little bit more detail about what are some of the components. What is it that Gigamon can do as far as the Gigasmarts? So I won't get too deep into it. The biggest ones that really stand out are usually the deduplication, the filtering, the netflow generation. And I think this was another big one too, the SSL decryption. So a lot of information is being encrypted, which is great. We need to encrypt everything. But the IT person, you need to know, if somebody's sending traffic to one of those cloud shared folders, you need to see what it is, right? You want to make sure it's not IP, your company intellectual property, being sent over to a place that you have no control over. So this is where Gigamon can do the TLS decryption. But then at the same time, healthcare or banking, you don't want to decrypt that traffic. You want to keep that encrypted because your employees need to make sure that that stuff is being kept encrypted and not decrypted. So this is where you can pick and choose what gets decrypted and what gets encrypted. All right, so we're all making the move into the cloud, which is great. It's making life a lot easier. We're able to move at the speed of light and build applications really, really fast. But then there's this gap that's starting to be established. So we have our cloud apps and tools that are great, But then we also have spent, what, 10, 15 years building our data center presence. So do we just throw all that away and then move everything over to cloud and then start from scratch again? And this is one of the things that we're seeing with all our customers is this visibility gap that's coming in place. So how are we able to optimize our customers' experience? Are we able to still provide the same security and compliance that we have in our data centers? How do we manage the complexity and the cost of running into a cloud, but possibly even multi-cloud? And what is driving our cloud adoption? And I think most of that is probably containers, right? The whole digital transformation is happening is because of containers. Okay, and so what Gigamon has introduced is this thing called the Hawk. And so the Gigamon Hawk provides, it runs on any source, so all the different clouds that we support, and most of you guys are probably using and supporting. We also have the transformation part of it, so all the different tools that we're able to send to. So Gigamon has about 150 eco partners that we work with that we're able to provide the visibility into the packet that they need to see. And we could run in any form factor. So legacy systems is referring to your data centers and what are the whatever system that you have. Some of you may be running stuff in bare metal. Operation technology. So this is more of the devices. So if you have like a medical IoT devices, if you have manufacturing IoT devices, so some of these devices that's become very challenging to gain access and visibility into. But because Gigamon operates on the network layer, so layer 2, we are able to passively gain that visibility into that infrastructure. And of course, while we're here for this call, this session is the containers and microservices. One of the things that's, I think, made the digital transformation revolutionary is in the sense that we are now using containers to build our applications, which basically decouples us from one, the underlying infrastructure, and two, the code base that we're using. So if you build an application in, let's say, Java, sometimes it becomes really hard to build new functionalities to your application because Java may not be flexible enough to do that. Maybe Perl, maybe Erlang, maybe C++. These different applications, these different languages are able to solve a problem that Java may not be able to. So containers have made life a lot easier by being able to use those different languages, and then they all work together in a microservices environment to then solve an issue for us. And mobility is more around our 5G, 4G space, which I won't get too much into on this session. And overall combined, this is what we do to provide that pervasive visibility through the transformation of the packets that we see in a Synthia tool. Now, one more slide that I like to talk about is, again, this growing complexity of having the visibility in a cloud environment, right? So, and this also applies to your data center too. So you have multiple tools, you have that need to be able to gain that visibility into the environment, and same thing with public cloud. And this is how Gigamon is able to solve that challenge for us. Okay, so now let's fast forward a little bit and see how the actual solution works. So we'll start off with this one. So this is the Gigamon Cloud Suite. The entire thing is orchestrated and managed through something called the GigaView Fabric Manager. So moving forward, I will refer to this as FM, Fabric Manager. So Gigamon has built a single solution. So it's a single software that you log into that's able to manage all of Gigamon's physical appliances, virtual appliances, or all the different clouds that you're logging into. And so these are some screenshots of what that looks like. So this is a dashboard that gives you right away a help status of what's happening with your environment. This is where you create the maps. This is where you say, I need to get the traffic from this source, and then I need to send the traffic to this destination. So this is the maps for all of the physical and virtual. And then the next screen, the inventory is the actual physical appliances, virtual appliances, and here's a list of the clouds that we're able to get that traffic from. And so the cool thing about this, it's a single place that you go to be able to manage your entire infrastructure. You don't have to jump from screen to screen to screen. A couple of tabs you have to jump around, but you don't have to log into a new application, to a new program. You're able to gain that visibility into your entire infrastructure, no matter where that runs. And that's really cool thing about it. And so now let's talk about how the solution actually gets deployed. So I will start off with, this is with AWS, but as you will see, the common theme here is it's the same look, the same feel, no matter which cloud you're running into. All right, so the very first thing, so in this scenario, we have a fabric manager that resides in your data center. So that's the FM. Fabric Manager has SDKs and APIs built into it for whatever cloud infrastructure you use. So if you're using VMware, then we incorporate with vCenter or NSXT Manager. If you're using Nutanix, then with Prisma Access. If you're using OpenStack, if you're using VMware, AWS, Azure, GCP, any of those, FM has those APIs and SDKs built into it to do that tight integration with the infrastructure. So the very first thing that FM does is establishes that secure connection into the cloud vendors management platform. Next, we deploy our visibility tier. And so in the public cloud vendors, our visibility solution is another machine. It's another appliance that we upload to the cloud vendors marketplace whenever we have a new version. Then we get a copy of that traffic from our EC2 or from our VMs. There's multiple ways that we get this copy, which I'll talk about a little bit more in this presentation. And then from there, you pick and choose. Do you want traffic in tools that you are using a virtual version of it? Or do you want to send that traffic back to your data center? So one of the things I like to think about is Gigamon's Hawk is able to extend the life and the reach of your existing tool set in your data center into a cloud environment. So earlier on, I talked about how we've spent 10, 15, 20 years building our data centers. Why would we want to just get rid of that up right away? So this is a solution that's able to aid with that. Surprise, surprise. Same solution for Azure. Exact same thing. Not much has changed. That's why I'm even going to build it out. All right. Now, another thing is earlier I was showing you a hybrid deployment, but the solution, of course, works as all in the cloud. So if you are on a much more advanced part of the journey into the cloud and you've already lift and shifted or refactored or moved all your equipment into or your environment into a cloud environment, Gigamon can also support that too. This could be a pure software play. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot very common is this idea of having a SecOps VPC where you create kind of a landing page. A landing where one of the benefits that we have in our data centers is, I know people hate this term, a choke point, but we had a single choke point in our data center, right? What could go in, what could go out, we had control over that. The security team, the networking team had that. But with a cloud environment, it becomes a lot harder to do that because you could very easily set up NAT gateways or just regular internet gateways and then be able to get out from anywhere. So what the IT teams are starting to do now, and in the hopes of wrapping their arms around this cloud environment, is creating a centralized location where they are controlling what traffic comes in and out of their infrastructure, of their cloud infrastructure, using this centralized location. So this is where we have this concept of a SecOps VPC, where so that becomes basically our hub. And then the spokes are the different business units or the different groups that set up their environment. One thing I like to equate is, so if you have a VPC, a virtual private cloud, or a VNet for Azure, is this idea that in our data centers, we used to use virtual LANs to create network segmentation, right? Going from a flat network to a multi-layered network. And so now customers or people are doing the same thing in the public cloud with using either VPCs or actual different accounts to create the segmentation, which plays well with Kubernetes and with containers. Again, it's the whole decoupling of things so that you could grow a portion of it and without having to impact the other portion of it. And of course, Gigamon's Hawk solution helps with that and supports that. And of course, if you had a data center, we could use VPN connection, you could use ExpressRoute, you could use Direct Connect, and we could send that traffic back if you needed to. And this is one of my favorite slides. It's a lot happening here, but if any of you guys have supported any of your developers or applications, then this is very familiar to you. We have our development stage, we have our staging area, and then we have production. Sometimes there's another one where the QA comes in here too, right, to do the testing to make sure before it goes out to production. And this is, again, part of the whole CI/CD pipeline that allows our developers to continuously deploy their code. And then we have machines that build the builds, and then it gets pushed on to production. And then we could do A/B testing because we're behind load balancers. Our users may not know if we're using version A or version B, and if something's wrong with version B, we could yank it, and then version A takes up. So this is a really cool part about how Gigamon's solution is able to fit this mindset of the CI/CD pipeline. So in this scenario, they have isolated the development. They don't want anybody to have outside access to this environment. So this is where we deploy the vSeries closest to the applications to provide that visibility in a development stage, which is really important now because of the zero trust model and some of the things that we've seen with the hacks and with the supply chain hacks that have been happening. So this is very, very important. And then as we go into staging, into prod, then we have a centralized location that we want to go bring that visibility into. And so then we're able to use one of the cloud vendors' transit gateways to be able to accomplish that. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are in a data center that happens to support Direct Connect or ExpressRoutes or with the cloud vendors, of course, then our solution could be a software in the cloud, public cloud, hardware in your data center, so it goes both ways. Now, I'm going to talk about our way of being able to acquire traffic multiple ways. All right, so the very first, I should mention, Gigamon was the very first company to provide network packet visibility enterprise level in AWS. So I was there at reInvent in November of 2016 when we launched our products, and it was amazing because a lot of people were like, wait, so you're giving us flow logs? Isn't that what AWS does? It's like, no, we're giving you actual raw packets, layer 2 to layer 4 raw packets for you to inspect. They were kind of blown away with that. Like, wait, you could give us actual packets in a cloud environment? How is that possible? Cloud vendors are doing everything in their power to provide network packet visibility. Aren't you breaking laws and rules? Like, no, we have the solution. And in fact, we've been working very closely with AWS, and AWS supports it. And so this is something that we're able to do. But at the same time, we know a lot of our customers do not like the idea of having to deploy something new on their infrastructure to gain that visibility. So Gigamon's solution was we use a kernel mod. So you have a Linux operating system. We use built-in functionality of the Linux operating system to get a copy of the packet to send over to our vSeries. But I can see how some people will dislike this idea because it's an additional thing they have to deploy under instances to gain that visibility. And so we were super excited when both Azure came out with their VTAP in 2017, and then AWS came out with their VPC mirroring capabilities in June of 2019. And for us, like, yes, this is great. Now we can gain that visibility into the infrastructure without the customers having to deploy our kernel mods or Windows agents onto the workloads. Now, the way this works is Fabric Manager does the orchestration of instantiating the taps in that environment. So you go into FM, you tell FM, hey, I want to use VPC mirroring capabilities in this environment to get the traffic out of it. And this is what FM does. FM goes and instantiates the VPC mirroring. Mind you, without Gigamon, it's a 7-step process per instance, and it's you have to do it proactively. whereas Gigamon is able to do this automatically. So because we have the tight API integration, you push a button, we go and we automatically get the traffic. And the other cool thing about this is we have this thing called automatic target selection. So when you create a map and you say, I want visibility in all of my database servers. So you could use VM tags, you can use different parameters to set up that filter. Okay, cool. So you have 5 instances that are being monitored. So let's say there's a rush that comes, and then all of a sudden your database goes from 5 instances to 7 instances. Because we have that automatic target selection and the tight API integration, when those 2 brand new databases come online, we will automatically instantiate the tapping capabilities and then get traffic from there. And then when the rush is gone and you go from 7 down to 4, we will also shrink our environment to support that. Now, I wanted to provide a quick visibility or summary of our own native tapping capabilities versus using the platform. So the first 4 are the same. But then after that, these are some of the additional things that Gigamon is able to provide with our own native tapping solution that we have. Unfortunately, Azure's tap has been on pause. We're really hopeful that they will be able to reintroduce and open up again because a lot of customers really enjoyed having that, the native tapping solution. Now, before I go into containers, one other thing I did want to mention is we do have a multi-cloud visibility solution. Which I think you guys probably understand that. It's a single FM that's able to reach into the different clouds and provide the visibility, right? So not much is changing. Okay, now let's talk about how we do this in a container environment. All right, we deploy, so there's 3 different ways of doing this, right? So either service mesh, there's actually deploying a container within a pod within an environment to get the traffic. And another one is Gigamon's container visibility, network broker as a container. So we have 3 methods of being able to provide this visibility. So let me go into the next slide, and it gets a little bit deeper technical how we do this. So again, the very first thing is FM has a tight integration with Kubernetes. What it does is we register the Gigamon VTAP container service and profiles. So that's the very first thing that gets established. Next, we deploy the container tap into the pod, into the work nodes, into, again, you determine where is the best place to do this. Once that's done, then we associate the traffic policies to security groups. Another thing that also happens is most likely you're using some kind of a network overlay, like a CNI, right? Calico or I am forgetting the other one. Calico or I forget another one. So whatever network overlay you're using, then what Gigamon does is that container is able to tap that CNI for us to get the traffic out of it. And then again, then it comes into our vSeries node, or if you have it, and so vSeries node would be, if you have it in a public cloud environment, if you are running in a VMware environment, you could send it to another vSeries that's in a virtual environment, or you can send it to our hardware. So you can pick and choose what works best for you. And the thing that's starting to happen now is with 5G, the lines of the lines are starting to get blurry. With 5G, a lot of those functions that used to be hosted on a physical hardware now is running in a virtual environment. So NFVs is network function virtualization is the thing that's happening. So there's a lot of synergy between our visibility solution and containers and a ESX or in a public cloud environment, like for example, native or EKS or AKS versus running this in a pure 5G environment. So you can mix and match. And one of the things that I also realized in talking to customers is one size does not fit all. So out of the box, the solution will probably be able to provide you 75, 80% of what you need. But there's that 20% that you've modified your environment to work best for you, that then we'll need to kind of modify the solution to give you that best 100% visibility. And again, you pick and choose what's the best for you. What are the best options for you? And I wanted to then just quickly, one more time, just show that we can do this across multiple clouds. It could be physical, virtual, containers, everything. Redshift, whatever it is that you're using, we can provide this visibility. And the next slide is a quick summary of what it is that we can do. So we have our pattern flow mapping capabilities, where you can, where we do the filtering of the appropriate traffic to send to the right tool to inspect. We have our target automatic target selection. So this applies to all of them, right? So if you're using NSXT, we can use NSXT's native tagging capabilities to get the traffic out of the instances. And again, we instantiate that with VPC mirroring, with any of those, whatever native tagging capabilities there are. One other thing I should also mention is we can also use tunnel as a source. So if you have let's say an F5 that's able to, you're using those as a load balancer, we can get a copy of the F5s. So they have a mirroring capability. We get that from there. If you're using Cisco CSR 1000V, we could get a span port, it's called ER span, from that. So Gigamon has multiple ways of being able to acquire that traffic, depending on whatever your use case is. And then from there, well, once we get the traffic, then we have our patents, Gigasmarts. So I showed you that long list of all the different things with the packets, the duplication, SSL decryption, filtering capabilities, NetFlow generation, all those things. And then if you're in the 5G space, we could do stuff with cups and correlations and all that. And of course, it works on any cloud. I want to say thank you, and please ask any questions.
All right, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Love seeing the technical details there of exactly how this works. For everyone out there, I've just brought up the poll question on the screen that says, what additional information would you like about the Gigamon solution? And of course, we appreciate your participation in that poll as well. We do have a number of great questions coming in. Thank you for those. Those will help you to be entered into our best question drawing that we're doing as well. And the experts from Gigamon are standing by to respond to those. So we don't have any time for live Q&A, I'm afraid, with the folks from Gigamon, but we do appreciate your electronic questions, and we will get back to those. So keep those coming, and I'll leave the poll question up here for just a moment, and then we'll move on to our next and final presentation on today's EcoCast. All right, just responding to the folks out here in the questions panel. Thank you, everyone. Deb, Daniel, Varun, Yaren, Luna, Ken, lots of great feedback out there from everyone. Thank you. We do appreciate that. Let's go ahead and move on now to our next presenter. Thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. And with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to our next presenter. Welcome, Pavan Shankar, Director of Security Product Marketing at Sysdig. Pavan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, David.
Thanks for being on the event. We're excited to have you. Take it away.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you, David and Riley, for having me here. Really excited to talk about this topic today. So let me just share my screen. And the way we'll go through this, I have a couple of slides that I want to set up for context and walk through this journey, and then jump into the product to give you a real live demo of what the Sysdig platform and what it looks like. So just to start at the very top, as we think about the cloud applications today in the landscape, these modern cloud applications are really transforming to start to be built on containers, Kubernetes, and really running in the cloud. And from the customers that we talk to, This move to cloud containers and Kubernetes is moving at a rapid clip. And these applications are typically being built using the cloud native tools, CI/CD tools like Jenkins, GitLab, these other tools that you might be using, and they're running as containerized microservices that can span across multiple cloud environments, whether you're running it in your own data center or you're running it on one of the public cloud environments or a hybrid cloud approach. And one of the benefits of really building your application stack on containers and Kubernetes is a couple of things. One, it gives you a lot of flexibility and the ability to be agile in your development as you're using these containers and these lightweight services to build and build and test these modern cloud applications. The second benefit is also the fact that these are based on open standards. You're using Kubernetes. It's the orchestrator of choice now. It's won the war in the community, and it's really become the de facto standard for orchestrating your containers. And it's because of the fact that it's open and standard, it gives you this flexibility to run those Kubernetes nodes and infrastructure on multiple cloud environments to really achieve that hybrid cloud agility or agility across on-prem and multi-cloud environments. And as we think about this application stack some more, the heart of your application is really at the compute layer. And this is being, as we talked about, running on containers, Kubernetes in the cloud. You could be running on EC2 instances, serverless functions, and so on. But this compute layer is frequently interacting with multiple cloud services as well, right? So you think about your storage services like S3, buckets, blob storage in Azure, databases like RDS, messaging queues, IAM services, load balancers, you name it. But all these different services are frequently interacting with your compute layer. So as we think about cloud teams, what I often see is cloud and security teams are looking to manage the risk across both the compute layer, the containers that are running, as well as the cloud infrastructure. So having a unified view into the risk across both these environments is extremely critical. And as we think about the risks, across both of these environments, on the workload side, when you're running these applications on containers and Kubernetes, some things to watch out for. One is vulnerabilities that might be in these applications that you should be you should be scanning for pre-deployment. Then runtime threats. So what happens when your applications are actually running in production? Are there any malicious activity or suspicious behavior that's occurring inside these containers? And usually it's hard to get that visibility into containers. So you really need that deep visibility to be able to detect these threats that are running inside your workloads. And finally, having an audit trail in the event that something goes wrong and the container is long gone. As we know that these containers are ephemeral. On average, they live about 5 minutes. So really having the full audit trail of exactly what happened even after that container is gone is extremely important. So really thinking about the workload side from a build, run, response standpoint, where you're really thinking about security in the build phase, scanning for vulnerabilities, detecting threats at runtime, as well as having an incident response framework in the event something does occur. And then on the infrastructure side, as we think about your cloud assets, the common thing that I often hear from customers is, what's running in my cloud environment? They just want the visibility into knowing what are these assets that are currently running, and are there any misconfigurations that are tied to them? And then beyond just the misconfigurations, they also want to understand, is there any risky behavior that's happening across these environments? Very similar to that runtime threat detection in the workload. Now, if you expand and take a step back and think about your entire cloud infrastructure, is a user logging in with that MFA? Are they spawning a EC2 instance, exposing a security group, or deleting, a bucket encryption? What's the activity that's happening in your cloud environment across the events as well as the user behavior, and really tying all that together is really important. And finally, compliance. This is something that we hear often on both sides. So it really spans across the cloud infrastructure and the workload. So meeting compliance objectives and framework, mandates for requirements like PCI, NIST, SOC 2 is really critical. And oftentimes compliance can be a blocker and we see this often, that's the box that the cloud teams and DevOps teams need to check off before they can push their apps to production. And as you think about the tools that these organizations are using today, a lot of times there are separate siloed tools for container security or cloud security. And what's the problem with that is that you're missing, you have all these different pieces of the puzzle in different places, and what's missing is a consolidated view to bring all these different pieces of data together in a single place to allow these security and cloud teams to see all these events and respond to them quickly. And as you think about the reality of the situation when it comes to cloud security, these breaches are now a dime a dozen, right? As we see some of these data points where posture, issues related to the bad posture, where exposures in Capital One led to a pretty massive hack. Facebook user data was exposed. Tesla had that crypto mining incident a couple of years ago. Really, all of these attacks are indicative of the fact that these are because of misconfigurations and just genuine human mistakes that might be happening. It could also be malicious activity, but a lot of times misconfigurations is the number one problem that results in these kinds of breaches and leaves the organization exposed to attacks that, unfortunately, result in having them end up in the news in a bad way. So as we think about solving for this problem, and this problem is urgent, right? It's here today, and customers need to address this now. And how do they do that? Is really by thinking about a holistic approach to threat detection and response, where they bring together this workflow across their cloud and container environments in a single pane of glass. Now, on the cloud side, what a lot of times they need to be able to do and have a workflow around is detecting and investigating that suspicious activity across all these different services that are running in your AWS Cloud, Azure, GCP environments. And the data for that comes from configuration metadata, cloud activity logs, cloud forensics data. All of this is really rich sources of data that needs to be analyzed. And then on the workload side, being able to detect threats across these environments using syscall data, the Kubernetes API audit logs, and really bring this together in a single place to allow customers to do three things. Number one, have deep visibility and unified visibility across both events from the cloud and the workload side, so they can actually detect things such as lateral movement that spans across both of these environments. And then often what I hear from customers is by having this single place and a single event store, they're able to easily query for events, create custom policies based on the context from the cloud and the Kubernetes and the workload environment. All of this is really beneficial to speed up their detection. And then finally, having a common policy language that allows them to detect threats across cloud hosts, Kubernetes, VMs, and container environments with a single interface is really, really beneficial because it saves them time. Rather than having to learn multiple tools, they have a single place where they can write policies from. And ultimately, all this does, like we said, saves them time, reduces the time to detect these threats across these environments. And one of the fundamental approaches of what we believe where security is heading is the fact that the future of the security platforms and security overall is based on an open standards approach. So as we think about Kubernetes and cloud environments being at the heart of this, many of these tools that are emerging now are based on the open source community, tools such as Falco. Falco is a runtime security engine, part of CNCF that Cisco created and donated to the CNCF. Now it's an incubation project there, but it's really gained a lot of momentum as the open standards approach for runtime detection. Similarly, there's OPA for policy governance, there's Istio and Envoy for service mesh, many of these other tools for several use cases. And the power of open source really helps in many ways. Number one, it drives standardization in the approach to take to secure environments where you can build on an open standards approach versus relying on a proprietary vendor to solve your problems. And the second one is you have that transparency in exactly how these policies are generated. When I talk to customers, one of the things that they really like is our platform is based on open source. So they can go inspect the open source project and see exactly how the rules were created, look at the GitHub, look at the policies, and actually understand how these alerts are being created so that they're not stuck in a black box with a proprietary, solution that's doesn't have the full picture and doesn't give them that insight into exactly what's happening. And ultimately, this gives them that confidence to accelerate their security and ensure that the security is keeping up with the pace of their software development or application development, and really building on that open source approach of building cloud applications and running them, but also securing them at the same time and keeping pace with that. So as we think about Sysdig as a platform, it really unifies container cloud security. And as you may have guessed it, building on an open standards approach and really building on this open source security stack. So on the container and Kubernetes side, the use cases that we provide are image scanning, runtime security, incident response, as well as monitoring, because these use cases are important to ultimately run and ship these applications. And on the cloud side, being able to manage the cloud security posture, so CSPM is a common use case that is usually required by customers to manage the security posture and check their configurations, but also detect threats in the cloud, respond to incidents in the cloud, as well as monitor your cloud applications and services that are running. And the popular project here, we're using Cloud Custodian under the hood for the CSPM. Falco, as we said earlier, really is the foundation for threat detection across both these environments. Sysdig open source is another tool for incident response and troubleshooting. And then Prometheus is a really popular tool, second to Kubernetes in the community as an open source project that has gained momentum. And it's really something that we extend for our customers to build POM2L queries and extend their monitoring use cases across clusters and clouds. And then compliance is something that we provide with out-of-the-box policies for many of these frameworks that customers need to meet as they embark on their cloud journey and as they build their applications on their containers and Kubernetes infrastructure running in the cloud. And now I'll talk a little bit about a story here that I think you guys will find it really interesting, which is all about threat detection in the cloud. So as we think about this topic here, one of the things that when I was talking to this customer, this is a financial services and payments company, and really their cloud security teams were really involved, where they wanted us to be able to map threat detection policies to be able to spot this anomalous activity that's happening in their AWS accounts. And they wanted us to build on existing AWS services like CloudTrail, CloudWatch, and Security Hub. So they gave us a list of CloudTrail logs that they were monitoring for. And what we did was provide out-of-the-box policies that were based on Falco that were able to ingest these CloudTrail logs and detect suspicious activity in their environment. And again, this is a really big win for the customer because it avoided future vendor lock-in. Eventually, if they decided to move beyond Sysdig, they still had this investment protection in the open source community and had that flexibility to be able to build on those rules and have that standards approach to build on. And finally, we mapped many of these policies to common security frameworks, one example being MITRE, where tagging it to the MITRE attack framework allowed the security teams to speak the same language and bridge the gap between the cloud development teams and the security teams and help them understand the severity of incidents, where they might not understand Kubernetes and containers well enough, but the security teams definitely understand, MITRE categories like lateral movement, or privilege escalation, and so on. And ultimately, this enabled them to respond to incidents faster and ship applications faster as the end goal. And just to summarize, before I jump into the demo, again, Sysdig is a secure Devops platform. We have two key products here, Sysdig Secure, Sysdig Monitor. Sysdig Secure covers everything and unifies container and cloud security. Sysdig Monitor does the same for monitoring and troubleshooting across containers, Kubernetes, and your Prometheus endpoints. And then on the core here is built on open source, so we talked a lot about that. So it's really building on an open source security stack, providing deep visibility across these different environments that you're running in, as well as making it really easy for you just to deploy and run at scale in your environment with a SaaS-first solution, as well as a simple installation model to get started quickly. So now I'll tab out of this and show you the product quickly in action. So we talked a lot about unified threat detection and response to really see the full picture across your cloud and container environments that enables you to secure these applications at the end of the day. So as we see, what we have here is in this insights view, where I am, this is a macro level view of what's going on in your infrastructure. So at the cloud account level, you can see what's happening, what are the events. I can see a summary of all the events that have occurred in the last, 6 hours, 3 days, whatever time period I choose. And what's nice is this gives you that single, pane of glass and kind of that full picture of that entire attack chain that might have happened, starting from a misconfiguration, someone logging into your cloud account and, allowing ingress SSH, deleting CloudTrail, and then, potentially spawning a shell in a container. So now going beyond just the cloud as the entry point and going into the workload itself, and then potentially, mining Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, as you can see some outbound connections. So what's nice here is you can see, okay, first of all, who logged into my account, who are the users, how many times has this happened, what kinds of events occurred, and then actually go down and see exactly, the types of events that happened when this workload was compromised, and go all the way down to, specific details. And you can see this and actually zoom into specific services in the cloud, go all the way down into, the different environments here, and actually see these from a risk-based view, where the red signifies high severity, the orange is medium, and actually really help you classify your response across both of these environments. So that's kind of in a nutshell about cloud security and what we allow you to do there. Several other use cases that I'll just quickly tab through here. So scanning for your vulnerabilities, both in the CI/CD phase, your registries at runtime, giving you a kind of a nice overview into what's happening from your vulnerability side and understanding your posture there. Compliance is another big one where we support several frameworks for NIST, PCI, SOC 2, but then also on the static side for posture, we can also check to see, is your cloud posture configured correctly? Are there misconfigurations here? Are you running as root? Is there a security group that's exposed? Is there a public-facing S3 bucket? And give you pass-fail reports that allow you to track that compliance and CSPM progress and security posture progress over time. And then as you think about policies now, really thinking about the types of policies that we have available for you, the out-of-the-box policies here across workloads, across AWS environments, tagged with different categories, like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, for example, is a great example here. And this allows you to actually zoom in on these policies. These are all out-of-the-box, curated based on Falco, so the open source tool that we have under the hood here, and really making it easy for you to extend these in your own environment and customize them easily, tag them quickly, and then create that policy detection framework in your environment to respond to these threats. And finally, when events do occur, we give you a full audit trail of exactly what occurred. You can sort it by different data sources, understand exec sessions in Kubernetes, network connections, commands, file activity, all of this really rich source of data that allows you to pinpoint exactly what's happening and who did what in Kubernetes, which makes it really interesting because now you can actually trace a full set of series of activity all the way from a user down to what commands did they run, what file activity did they touch, and so on. So really, at the end of the day, securing the entire lifecycle for your workload across scanning, compliance, runtime security, incident response, and then on the cloud side, being able to really unify this with misconfigurations in your cloud, threats in your cloud environment, as well as connecting it down to the workloads itself to really give you that full picture. So that pretty much concludes my presentation here. Hopefully you found this demo useful and you're able to kind of get a quick glance at how the product works and see this in action. And if any of this is interesting and you're looking for more, definitely go over to our website and you can actually play with the product. We have a great free trial experience here that allows you to really play with all these different functionalities, and you have a 30-day free trial. There's no credit card required, and you can sign up here on the platform and get started quickly with Sysdig here. Great. So I will stop my screen sharing here and take any questions that are coming in from the Q&A panel.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Pavan. Really appreciate you doing that demo there. That was really cool to see. I love the user interface. I'm a sucker for a beautifully designed user interface. So you guys are doing a great job with that. We do have some questions for you from the audience, and while we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll question for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about the Sysdig solution? And we do have some questions coming in for you. First question here comes from Ned. He said that he's interested in Sysdig's automated image scanning capability to detect OS and non-OS vulnerabilities. Do you have a recommendation on how he can get more information or any more information on that feature?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you go over to the website, so I would start with the website there. We have a lot of good content around image scanning specifically, and also really good blogs there that talk about image scanning best practices. So that will give you a good flavor about what we provide and how to think about that image scanning approach for OS, non-OS vulnerabilities, Docker file best practices, and so on. And we also have a free trial, which you can sign up for and actually see how the product scans your images, both in the CI/CD phase, registry, as well as at runtime. And then we also have a webinar that's coming up that's specifically on top Docker file best practices. So that's something to watch out for.
Nice, nice. A lot of different options there. Thank you.
Yep.
Another question here from Paul. He's asking if you can give some examples of the types of data that Sysdig can aggregate and analyze.
Yeah, sure. So, so on the workload side, the key data source here is we're pulling syscall data. So the way we deploy the agent is you deploy the agent and either via a kernel module or an eBPF probe, we're able to hook into the kernel and get full visibility in a non-intrusive way of all the system calls that are traversing the kernel from the workloads that are running in the user space. So that gives us full visibility into commands, connections, all file activity, any process, pretty much everything, because nothing lies to the kernel. So we collect all that rich data from there. Then the second data source is on the Kubernetes side, audit logs. So that tells you who did what in Kubernetes. So we ingest that and also allow you to detect suspicious activity there at the API server level. And third would be the CloudTrail and cloud activity logs. So this is basically looking at CloudTrail, GCP audit logs. Again, similar model where we ingest that rich source of data, analyze it for you, and give you that suspicious activity. And then configuration-wise, we use the configuration metadata from Cloud Custodian under the hood as a data source there. So that pretty much covers all the key data sources that we collect and analyze for providing deep security coverage.
Nice. Nice. And I think that ties in with this question from Young, who's asking if Sysdig can help to improve compliance and security around containers and Kubernetes and multi-cloud.
Yes, absolutely. So I didn't get a chance to flash this in the demo, but we support various frameworks for container and Kubernetes compliance, NIST 800-190, 853, SOC 2, PCI, right, you name it. We have a lot of those capabilities supported out of the box, and we support many of the Kubernetes environments as well, so GKE, cluster compliance, EKS, AKS, all just based on KubeBench and Docker Bench, as well for the Docker side, and then Linux hardening and Linux benchmarks there. And then on the cloud side, we support CIS Foundations benchmarks today for the static checks of your cloud posture. So we're really thinking about unified compliance across containers and cloud, across CIS, and all these different standards that I just mentioned here.
Excellent. Bradford's asking if Sysdig is considered a monitoring and security compliance platform.
So Sysdig is a secure DevOps platform, like I was talking about. So we do support several use cases around security, and that's both cloud and container security. So cloud security use cases like CXDM, threat detection, incident response, as well as on the container security side, image scanning, runtime security, network security, incident response, runtime security, all of that. And then we also do have monitoring. So, all the rich data sources that we collect allows you to monitor and troubleshoot your Kubernetes and container workloads, your cloud services. So you also have a lot of the monitoring and troubleshooting use cases that we offer in the product. And what's nice is it's a single agent and a single platform to deploy. So you really can consolidate all these use cases with a single agent, a single backend, and the single data source that provides you that unified visibility across both security and monitoring.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I'm afraid we're running out of time here in our live Q&A session. There's a lot more electronic questions for you to answer. I did want to ask you one final question, and that is just around getting started. What if folks are excited about what Sysdig can do, what do you recommend?
Yeah, great question, David. I would highly suggest go to the Sysdig.com webpage and click the Start Free button. You don't have to believe anything I say, but if you want to see the product in action and really experience it for yourself, test drive it for 30 days, and you can get a beautiful experience of all the capabilities that we have to offer. We just, touched the iceberg, if you will, today.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation, Pavan. Good to have you on.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
For more information on Sysdig, as Pavan said, check out the Sysdig website. Also, check out the handouts tab there. There is a resource from Sysdig on the Securing Kubernetes 101 checklist. Looks like a very well-designed resource. Make sure you download that before you go, because we are about to wrap up here on today's EcoCast. I do want to announce our final gift card winner. I'll leave the poll question up for everyone to respond to while I do that. The final Amazon $500 gift card winner on today's event is going to Nathan Kimpel from Missouri. Congratulations, Nathan Kimpel from Missouri. I will post all the prize winners there in the questions panel. And before you go, of course, I want to thank everyone out there for being on the event today. Don't forget to check us out on the iTunes Store, the 10 on Tech podcast. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming event, we would love to chat with you. Reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I hope to see you on next week's event, especially if you are in the education or government IT, any sort of public sector IT organization. We're running an EcoCast just for you on supercharging education and government IT and cloud environments, happening next Wednesday, April 28th. Hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone who joined us on the EcoCast today on supporting and enabling modern applications. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.